Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. This is Comic Tropes After Dark, the weekly spinner rack. I'm your host, Chris, and this is a show where we're going to talk about the latest comic book news, and then we're going to do a bunch of comic book reviews. A lot of great stuff that came out this week. I'm just going to hint at that. Latest issue of Beneath the Trees, Rite of Spring by Patrick Horvath. Really cool. Oh my God, am I super into this book, Escape by Rick Remender and Daniel Acuna. This thing's an incredible book. And Skinbreaker, finally here. Robert Kirkman, David Finch, they've been working on this for like 8 years. And I just noticed something. First 3 books I get, they're in a way all talking animal books. In a way. We've got some incredible news. We've got no interview tonight. That we're going to just sort of streamline it. So what I'll do is, if I get done with the news and the reviews in a timely manner, I've got a sketch here that I could like work on inking and chat with everybody. Let me give some shout outs to the folks that have jumped in early. Let's say hello to all these wonderful people. Hey, a super chat already. Thank you, Steve, coming in early with a sugar-free Mountain Dew Baja Blast. I appreciate it. Got some coffee here, which will give me some energy. Oh, there's another super chat. Let's see. I just finished watching Art Spiegelman, Disaster is My Muse from PBS. The whole thing is on YouTube, and I recommend it to anyone who loves comics. Am I correct in remembering that PBS was given a lot of pressure not to air that by the government in a way? I could be wrong, but I know that there was some documentary that PBS got a lot of pressure not to air. Let's see. Hello, Sherb. And whoa, a third super chat. Thanks for the awesome live streams. They're the highlight of my Mondays. I'm with Garfield on hating them. You've built an amazing community. Yes, well, we do have an amazing community full of returning people and new faces. What did I do? We're going to get into it as like the second news item. So I'm going to talk about it real soon at the top of the show. Just wanted to give some shout outs to people here early on. 50 waiting. Oh, I'd love it if you hit like. Thank you, Mike. Always good to see you, man. All right. It's a mix of things. It's an interesting. All right. I gotta keep going. Oh, wait, there's my buddy Randy. Always good to see you. The only good thing about Mondays. You're very kind. You're very kind. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I do have finally, the newest Comic Tropes is out. Hey, Gene, I'll see you real soon. Going to the East Coast soon. Yes, well, thanks for having that great clip from Eric Larson. And ironically, on Direct Edition and West Coast Avengers, he's now got a brand new interview with Eric Larson going over more stuff. I did see Marvel Zombies. I overall liked it. There's a few things that I could talk about. I'll tell you what, I'll hold that for towards the end of the show when I'm drawing. Why don't we kick things off with the news?
We're sitting on top of the story of the century here.
Put an ad on the front page. Cash money for a picture of Spider-Man. He doesn't want to be famous, and I'll make him infamous.
Hi, guys. This is April O'Neil from Channel 6 News, and I am here in beautiful New York City.
All right. Look at that clickbaity thumbnail. Playing the game. Will people pay attention? Will they come to check out what I had to do, if anything, with this Fortnite emote situation? Well, we'll get to it. Tell you what, let's start off, though. We'll let people filter in because the live show, people like still coming in, give people time to warm up. But I'll start off with a pretty big piece of news talking about the new version of Comic-Con. There is an organization, if you're not clear. Comic-Con International is a nonprofit. They're the people that put on San Diego Comic-Con. If I'm remembering right, maybe WonderCon as well in LA. I could be wrong about that, but they definitely do. Of course, Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con. They've branched, maybe you could say, into doing other versions of Comic-Con. They just had one on a cruise. Trailer Drake, or Comic Drake would probably be more accurate. Anyway, my buddy Drake on Comic Drake did a review of that cruise. Suffice to say, didn't look that Comic-Con-y to me. Didn't look that amazing. And now they just had, in the past weekend, Comic-Con in Spain, Malaga, Spain, with a pretty big guest. So let's talk about it. This was their first Comic-Con that they've held outside the United States, first of all, in Malaga, Spain. And they had a number of big guests, a number of the guests that you'd see at any big convention. I would say, arguably, the biggest draw was Peach Momoko. First of all, the good. No fights reported. That's good. We've had a lot of problems when Peach has been kind enough to donate some of her time to go into a convention where, you know, scalpers essentially are just trying to get as many signatures as possible, and they fought with each other in lines and stuff, and that's not cool. It's not what Comic-Con is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a meeting place for people with shared interests in creative arts and storytelling. So, however, the convention organizers, I would say, drastically underestimated the interest in Peach Momoko specifically. They didn't think that many people were going to show up for her. I don't know why they thought that. This is what's been reported in actual newspapers in Spain. They had to switch to a ticketed system. You didn't pay for it, but, you know, it was first come, first serve. At first, it was going to be 100. Peach was like, I can go up to 150. 150 people, and they capped it. But think about it. Thousands came. It's tricky. The local news really reported a lot of problems on this. First of all, the convention, they estimated for the first time doing this convention that they would have about 60,000 guests. They more than doubled that, over 120,000. Very hot weather, lots of people waiting in lines outside. And then they added to some of these problems. The Spanish newspaper El País noted problems, including the massive lines I just mentioned. No outside drinks allowed. I understand not allowing food from outside. People got to have water. New York Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con, they now let people bring in bottles of water. That's a thing. And some of the things they were saying, they said that they had people pay for tickets into certain panels, didn't get in. No QR scanners to show that you had paid for a photo with a celebrity. They just didn't have the scanners there. So they had a number of problems. They were not prepared for the scale. And I don't know, you know, at the same time, if you get 120,000 people, that's big business. So hopefully they do it again and do it right, but not awesome for a lot of the people that were there. That's a fair point. It is called Comic-Con International. Anyway, I feel bad for people. Like, it sounds like a lot of waiting in lines for this stuff because they just did not anticipate it being as popular as it was. But I don't know why you wouldn't expect that. It's the brand name. It's the big guests. Yeah, exactly. Like, the fights and stuff that happened the last time she was in New York were pretty big news. So how do you not prepare ahead just in case, right? Let's see. Hey, troopers, remember, as the holidays come, always be a homie, emulate the heroes we read about, and take care of yourself and your mental health. Well, that's super positive. That's great. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate the support from me. Appreciate the kind words. Just getting that caffeine to perk up and do a good show, which means quick movements. Quick movements are what people like. All right, let's get into it. Fortnite has removed the Peacemaker emote, and if the responses to my social media channels are anything to go by, apparently that means the game is ruined, and that I specifically ruined things for them. But let's just let's break down the story from the beginning in case you don't know what I'm talking about. Minor spoilers for Peacemaker. I'm not going into specific plot points for any episode, but I am talking about the theme of season 2, okay? So you'll see where I'm going. So, first of all, season 2 of Peacemaker's out right now, and the most recent episode finally confirmed what people had been suspecting since episode 2, over a month ago now, that it uses a version of something from the comics, Earth X. We've seen that, in fact, adapted into other things outside of the comics before. Earth X is a version of the universe in the comics where the Nazis won. Okay? Specifically, they won during World War II in the comics, but that wouldn't necessarily have to remain consistent for different adaptations. The Arrowverse had an Earth X crossover, and Arrow and Flash and Supergirl and the Legends of Tomorrow, they all teamed up against their evil doppelgangers. That was pretty fun. Actually, they first introduced it, now that I think of it, in their spin-off The Ray, based on what was The Ray from? DC bought them from another company, and it's not coming to me right now. Anyway, The Ray in the Arrowverse exists in Earth X. So anyway, after that, on Friday, I posted this right here to social media, and you can see it's had over 1 million views, which is a good amount, right? It's I don't know if that counts as viral or not, but it's a good amount when you're doing something this niche. And I posted that the opening dance for the show looks like it was meant to evoke a swastika. I don't know that that's necessarily a controversy. I didn't think of that as much of a hot take. Honestly, I'll be honest. I probably would have phrased this more carefully if I thought I'd have this level of eyeballs on it. It was a pretty casual, spur of the moment, observation, and I just wanted to throw it out there. Oh, look at this. I think it meant this. I think that the show was hinting at what it would be about from the very beginning. Well, it gained traction, obviously. A lot of news articles, a lot of shares, and to be fair, other people probably did the same observation, okay? So I'm not saying I was the only one, but I've got a channel, so I do think that I think my observation about it probably got shared more than other observations about it, but I don't know. On Saturday, though, the next day, Fortnite posted this update saying that they're disabling a dance emote where Peacemaker did this dance, or any character you could buy this dance, okay? Until they figure out what the creative intentions were. And they said if it turns out that basically it's true that it was meant to evoke that, they'll give people refunds. I should have a peek. I've got a decent intro, right? I've got a decent intro. Yes, I burned down Fortnite. I like Fortnite, by the way. I think I'm pretty good at it, to be honest. Yeah, I've definitely had other posts get that sort of traction, but they're usually jokes or something like that. Or some weird, just more of I don't know. Yes, I've had others that get big. So anyway, yeah, Fortnite. I mean, that's a pretty big deal, though, right? Within 24 hours to get that kind of views and have the game decide hey, if this is accurate, we're pulling it. Once the show made it clear what the theme of the season was going to be, I figured that the dance was meant to evoke, moves that we've seen before that are definitely supposed to evoke the swastika. Specifically, I'm talking about the producers, the Mel Brooks movie, as well as the remake. And they've got the Springtime for Hitler ridiculous play that does a dance like this. And there's a Disney Donald Duck cartoon where Donald has a nightmare that he's in Nazi Germany. I'm specifically saying look, they did it here. So and I remember that, and they did it here, So those are the things that I was thinking of when I go, oh, I bet it's intentional. I bet it's intentional. Was it? I don't know. Only James Gunn could really tell us if it was intentional or not. I thought that it was a kind of obvious thing. Some people think I'm crazy. But I think it's crazy that Fortnite would add a dance when they don't really even know where this R-rated type show is going. You know, it's a show that's TVMA or whatever. It's on HBO. It's aimed at adults. It's a little weird that they would put something like that in a game that they market to kids without really knowing that much about it or where it's going. Can we meme Freakazoid into DCKO? Apparently you can meme anything in there. Fortnite always rushing for every new trend. And I guess that works for them. But, yeah. Thank you. Oh, Dave, like, some of the things that people have said to me are terrible. I've gotten, like, replies, quotes, but also messages telling me to, like, end myself and telling me that I ruined the game, that I specifically ruined the game. Yeah, I'm all for a special dance, Jim. Good to see you. I'm going to be talking later in the news about some stuff for Mr. Jimothy here. But you're right. We did do a great episode of Step Up 2 with fellow comic book pros Jorge Corona and Morgan Beam. And Morgan has a comic out this week, folks, that I'll review. But on this channel, you can watch all the four of us review Step Up to the Streets. But Morgan Beam drew the first issue of Twilight Zone. So that'll be something to talk about tonight. Good to see you here, pal. Anyway, I just thought I'd talk about it. I don't really like being in the news. Oh, yeah. Oh, I forgot to bring it down. Maybe next week I can show you. My sister got me an LED backpack for Christmas. And what that means is that I can, with an app, program it to either show any image I upload or about like 4 seconds of any video. So I've programmed my LED backpack to, like, say comic tropes on the top and show like about 4 seconds of my animated opening on the bottom. And I just posted that earlier today to social media. It's really cool. It's a good gift. So I've got a good sister. Oh yeah. People are like, some people are mad, but I also sort of feel like the people that are maddest are probably the youngest, you know, because I don't know how important it would be to the average adult to have like a dance taken away from their game. Yeah. But anyway, that's about all I can think to say about it. I thought it was a fairly good observation, and that's what I do. All right. At the end of the day, it's like, what do I do within the social media realm? I talk about comic books and their history and their techniques. So, yeah, I saw something. I put 2 and 2 together, in my opinion, and I shared it with the world. And in this case, people were mad. I think most people probably found it interesting, and that's the extent of it, which is all it was meant to be. But there were a lot of people that did not like it. Yeah, well, that's a good point, is like, people are like mad that, like, and I think justifiably so, Fortnite removed this right away, right? But they have like dance emotes by guys like this and Kanye, who said he's a Nazi, and it's like they're not removing that stuff. So, like, what's the line? What's the line that Fortnite has? It doesn't seem to be very consistent or make sense. Let's go on to some more news. We've got some fun stuff. So we're talking about James Gunn, so let's talk about how he's hinting at potentially some more Charlton characters. This was on Thread. Someone asked, will we see more Charlton characters? if you don't know, Peacemaker and Judo Master were both originally from Charlton Comics. DC owns them now. And he mentions some other Charlton characters that DC owns. Blue Beetle, Captain Atom, The Question. And James replied, "You might be in luck." So that seems to indicate something. I don't know how he has enough time to interact with fans and do like all these podcasts and interviews and stuff in addition to making movies and approving movies, but he seems to be doing it. So if you're not aware, Charlton Comics existed from 1945 all the way through 86. In 86, tough times for them, and they sold off their assets, including selling their superhero characters to DC. DC then had, a Crisis on Infinite Earths, and they had just recently bought things like Captain Marvel from Fawcett. They'd bought Plastic Man from Quality Comics. They had these other superheroes that they bought from smaller companies that had fairly recently gone under. And with Crisis, they just sort of rolled it together and boom, now they've got a new universe with all these other superheroes. Some of the prominent characters from the days of Charlton would include the Ted Kord version of Blue Beetle. Before that, he was a Golden Age character, and Charlton reimagined him. But Captain Atom, Peacemaker, of course, Judo Master, The Question, that's a big one, Nightshade, and Thunderbolt. And I'm not sure about Thunderbolt because DC definitely bought it and made some Thunderbolt comics, but more recently I've seen Dynamite has also made Thunderbolt comics. So I'm not clear if they're sharing that or if the rights are somehow in the public domain. I'm really totally unclear on why two companies do Peter Cannon Thunderbolt comics. I just don't know. But that could be fun. I didn't even mention Sergeant Steel. He's used in Wonder Woman these days. So there's some good Charlton characters. I think my favorite characters from the comics themselves are Blue Beetle and Question. But I'll be honest, the Peacemaker and Judo Master adaptations are a blast. Just an absolute blast. DC did lose the rights to Peter Cannon Thunderbolt? Okay, I didn't know that. I mean, I have another hot take on, on Peacemaker, but maybe that's closer to spoilery. I'll wait until later in the show when I'm drawing and we talk about like just the TV shows based on comics that are out now, like Alice in Borderland and Marvel Zombies, things like that. Hold on, I'm going to take a bite of a nacho that Chris, you made me. Thank you. I need protein. Scott Snyder talked about the future of Absolute Batman. This wasn't even this week, actually. It was a little while ago, but I only just caught it. He was on Casually Comics, and Sasha was interviewing him. It's a good interview. It's a little over an hour. But he mentioned a few things that I hadn't really seen picked up anywhere else. For instance, Scott said that he'd be introducing Harley Quinn very soon and bringing back Dick Grayson in a big way. And if you're like, I don't remember Dick Grayson being a part of the story. He wasn't really part of the story, but you can see him in the background as an EMT in the first Absolute Batman arc. He also explained, this is interesting, that he and artist Nick Dragotta got together in the studio to hash out where they're going with it, and that they are already mapped out what will amount to between 30 and 40 issues. So it seems like they're both planning to be in this for the long haul, which is really cool. How do you eat one single nacho? You host a show live, and you become keenly aware of how gross it would be to just keep eating. So you cut yourself off at one that just keeps you going. If you look, the EMT has a badge called Grayson, and he's really annoyed at Batman. It's funny because Batman's beating up a bunch of criminals and stuff, and all the roads are blocked for some reason. So the EMTs are taking people in wagons attached to bikes. What monstrosity will Harley be in this? This Gotham is slowly turning into the Silent Hill. It's definitely way more horror tinged. And I'll say, if you guys look on Instagram and TikTok for Absolute Batman, there are some comedians that have made some very funny observations where Absolute Batman looks at his villains and just sort of like gives up and walks away because the villainous versions that he faces in Absolute Batman are just terrifying. Yeah. Jack is super hyper today, and he's running around upstairs meowing. I don't know if you guys can hear it or not. There's a little bit of reaction to the AI Stanley hologram that came out. So, this past weekend wasn't just Comic-Con Malaga with all their lines. There was also the LA Comic-Con that hosted a new AI hologram of Stan Lee for between $15 and $20, depending on when you bought the ticket. You could take a picture with it or ask it a question. What an interesting set of observations. People think Martha will become the new Harley Quinn. I think it's going to be Barbara Gordon. Both interesting ideas. Maybe. It's weird, folks. There's video up now that you can watch on, YouTube or Reels on various social media platforms. The results are a little uninspiring. First of all, there was an interview this week about it. The CEO of the convention's parent company is a guy named Chris DeMullen, and he was the guy who pitched the idea to all the parties involved to make this happen. It was his idea, and part of his interview with Ars Technica, he says, "It's unfortunate that a few people have really negative things to say about it, sight unseen, just the level of it being a concept." Yeah, because it's based on a dead person that hasn't even been dead that long. That's why we're creeped out. And so now this is anecdotal. I couldn't really post all the opinions and responses and stuff, but I scrolled through videos on Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok just to get the temperature of the responses to this thing. And while I will admit that some of the people in the video seem to be having a good time, I mean, why else would they be in it? I didn't see any positive responses. I either saw people angry or at best joking about how weird it was. But a lot of people were kind of like angry. I would also say that you can still tell that it's AI. It looks like Stan, but he doesn't really move. It's not like he walks around or anything. He's in a box. He just stands there and like moves his head a little bit. And the voice sounds like him, except the cadence isn't quite right. There's pauses and stuff like that. And he specifically, you can tell that they've like programmed boundaries because everything is specifically Marvel. He's just like, oh, the way Marvel would think about that is this. It's just strange, to be honest. It's just bizarre. Well, you say that it's what Lee would have wanted, but actually, shortly before he passed away, he was fighting with Powell Entertainment and the other companies that sort of were had his name on it, and they were like trying to get his likeness rights and stuff. And he was actually fighting that because he didn't like the idea of other people having control over that other than just him. But the strangest thing is this: you could go up and ask a question, right? Fine. But if you went up and you played music, he would start to dance. He'd put on a pair of sunglasses. He was wearing sunglasses, and he'd dance. Nobody got that joke, right? That was a reference to Weekend at Bernie's 2, the movie where they realized, how do we keep going with this corpse? Okay, now there's a supernatural element. Whenever music is playing, the corpse of Bernie will dance, and that will trick people into thinking he's still alive. Thank you for the super chat. Stan AI is technically illegal because of the lawsuit regarding a Wendy's company using someone who looks and sounds like ScarJo to promote a new burger. A lot of AI stuff fall into that legal zone. Well, the company that made this supposedly has the likeness rights to Stanley. So I don't know that this is illegal. I don't think it's very creative. Oh, dude, the sequel is, yeah. You guys didn't know there was a sequel. Okay, at least one person saw it. The first one's a little bit funny for its time. The second is so bad. Yeah. It's illegal. Well, let's see what happens. If it is, then trust me, it'll be in the news. I'm just here to slow down your creative process, Stepan. And if I can have the Weekend at Bernie's music playing on repeat instead of you drawing, mission accomplished. All I'm here to do is take away all of our fun, take away the emotes from Peacemaker, take away Stepan's sexy supernatural comics. All right, what else we got for news? Oh, this is so cool. This just came out of nowhere for me, but Eric Powell is making a Thor graphic novel. And I really love and respect Eric Powell. I think he's fantastic. See, the Tupac hologram wasn't that different from Stan back in the day. People thought that was weird too, but at least you can sort of argue that remixing music with even the deceased isn't as ghoulish as this. But thank you for the super chat and the opinion. I do appreciate it. Most recently, Eric Powell co-wrote and illustrated that book on Dr. Frederick Wortham, the guy who, really cracked down on comics in the 50s. But yeah, Eric Powell of Goon fame. He's amazing. So this looks really interesting. Marvel and Abrams books. This is that same deal where there was the graphic novel by Alex Ross for Fantastic Four. You may remember he did that in like, instead of painting, he did it in like colored pencils and stuff, I think. Anyway, Abrams Books is teaming with Marvel, and they're going to release an original graphic novel by the Goon creator, Eric Powell. It's called Behemoth of the Black Moon, Thor, and it comes out in May as an 80-page hardcover. Okay. Powell has said, if you look up these news articles where it was announced, he's quoted, and he said that he was allowed to do whatever he wanted to make this, and he wanted for his story to lean into the Thor stories that influenced him the most. Specifically, he calls out Jack Kirby, of course, and Walt Simonson, one of my favorites. He also promised monsters, cosmic monsters. Well, he's great at stuff like that, so that sounds like a great fit. Yes, exactly right. Abrams Books is also going to publish that X-Men Elsewhen, basically John Byrne's X-Men fanfic that he did for many years, and that's legit what it is. So, yeah, Abrams has also got a partnership with Marvel where they're doing books about specific character histories or creators, and they've hired other pros to write those. So it's kind of cool. Yeah. A lot of the stuff that Abrams does, they're more of a boutique publisher, but they seem to pick some pretty high quality projects. So I've enjoyed what I've seen by him. Oh, this was interesting. The Spider-Man comic strips are getting collected, and the best ones of them, the beginning ones. So Marvel and Clover Press have teamed up. There's a Kickstarter that just launched, and they're collecting the first 4 years of the Spider-Man newspaper comic strip. And if you don't know, it was by Stan Lee and John Romita Jr. Senior. Jesus, I just said that without thinking. It's a soft cover with a slipcase. It's letter size, but landscape. And it includes, of course, the color Sunday strips as well as the black and white weekly. And like I said earlier, it's by Stan Lee and John Romita Sr. He was the artist for a little more than the first 4 years. And each volume is one full year. It's really convenient for them. The strip started January 3rd. So it basically is very easy to do the first 4 years. I'm sure that somewhere these have been collected, but I couldn't think of it off the top of my head, and I didn't really look. Anyway, the comic strips, I always read them as a kid. I didn't always love them because they go so slow, you know? When it's an adventure story, it almost feels like you give up one whole panel to just recap whatever's happened recently. And then you were left with basically 2 more panels. But they've always had good artists on it, especially John Romita. The most recent one before it wrapped up around 2019 or so was, I want to say Alex Saviuk, who also did a bunch of stuff for the comics. Off to have dinner. Love your show. And the golden comic tropes was great. Well, thanks for watching and thanks for the support. Very, very kind. Dude, I would not be surprised. I don't know for a fact, but I do have a hard time believing Stan was sitting down writing them all, to be honest. Jim Shooter, too? I got to look that up. Going to talk about that. The Ultimate Spider-Man Magic the Gathering card has so many people demanding it be banned immediately because it's broken. Whoops. Usually they're pretty good at playtesting that stuff these days. Yeah, that's all I'm saying is they have good art, and it would be kind of cool to look back and see Romita Sr., giving his all to, 3 panels a day. It's $110 for all 4 volumes, and they have some other stuff that you could get on the Kickstarter, like puzzles and stickers, but I'm like, well, now who are we aiming this at? Like, toddlers? They're not going to read this, so kind of weird. Extras. Figuring out extras in a crowdfunded campaign, I can understand that being a challenge, but, there are things that people like, okay, I want to pay a little more for the hardcover, or I want to pay a little bit more for a special variant cover that you're not going to be printing as many of. Certainly, if you are offering actual original art, got it. But I don't know. I've always felt that the little tchotchkes, a key ring, a sticker, it's just not as exciting. I've never wanted any of that. It's just clutter for me. Maybe some people feel different. I don't know. All right. Spider-Man 4 updates. A couple of Spider-Man 4 updates. First of all, Deadline reported this week that Marvin Jones III, he's also known by his rapper name Crondon, will appear in the upcoming Spider-Man movie playing the villain Tombstone. Very cool. Very cool, because Jones previously voiced the character in Into the Spider-Verse. Now he's playing him in live action. And you may have seen him before, comic book wise. He did play the villain in Black Lightning. I'm forgetting the name of the villain right now, but he was like a crime boss on Black Lightning. Tombstone, if you're not familiar, is an African-American albino, similar to Jones. He's also a crime boss, and that might make sense since we know Punisher is in the movie. So maybe that's how they all come together. Yes, he's the guy that played Tobias Whale. Thank you. Black Lightning villain. I like Tombstone as a villain. I loved the Spectacular Spider-Man era when Tombstone had a beef specifically with editor Robbie Robertson, and Spider-Man was just sort of protecting him. That was a really cool storyline. So I don't know that he'll be a huge part of the movie, but he's definitely in the movie. Also, this is more of a rumor territory, but a bunch of fans and some of those, gossip social media channels are speculating that Mark Ruffalo could be in this upcoming Spider-Man movie because if you go back to the original Ultimate comics around 2008, Hulk destroyed a building which killed Peter Parker's parents. And that's why he was raised by Aunt May. That's Ultimate Origins, written by Brian Michael Bendis, specifically issue 4, if you were looking to reread it. Issue 4 has Dr. Banner experiment on himself. He goes on a rampage for a few seconds, instantly kills Peter Parker's parents, feels guilty about it, and Nick Fury kicks him in the face and knocks him out. It's a weird bit of story. Sorry, yes, we do know that Hulk is in it. This is speculation as to why he could be in it. He could just as easily be, for all we know, like a professor at the university or something along those lines. Or maybe Bruce Banner doesn't remember that Peter Parker and Spider-Man are the same person, but Hulk does, kind of like Hulk remembered Sentry, but everybody else in the world forgot. There's a lot of ways you could go, but there is comics precedent for them having a relationship that could be emotionally charged. They weren't really super spies. They were just scientists working for S.H.I.E.L.D., or at least working for Nick Fury. This was sort of a flashback origin for Ultimate Origins was giving you the origin of Ultimate Wolverine, Ultimate Captain America, Ultimate Magneto, and how all of that stuff was sort of connected and tied together before the debut of the Ultimates and Ultimate Spider-Man. I don't know. It feels like that's pretty dark territory to go down, because we kind of like this version of the Hulk, don't we? To think that he could be responsible for killing Peter Parker's parents is pretty damn dark. I don't know. I don't know. I'm just saying that a lot of people are talking about it. I can see where it's being pulled from. I went back and read the comic. And I was like, I guess, but I don't know. Speaking of Brian Michael Bendis, could he be returning to Marvel? There he is on the phone talking to Marvel. That's an actual photo of him. Actually, that's from a book he did that was published at the very beginning of this year, which I still think is going to make my top 10 list of the year. It's Brian Michael Bendis talking about his time being hired to write the Spider-Man musical. And what a wild story that was. Anyway, Bleeding Cool reports that an industry insider told them that Brian Michael Bendis is going to be returning to Marvel and that we could expect a formal announcement of that at New York Comic-Con. If you don't know, Bendis worked at Marvel from 2000 through 2017, starting on Ultimate Spider-Man in 2000. And then in 2017, he announced that he had an exclusive deal at DC. That went through 2021. And since then, the last few years, he's been doing creator-owned comics. A lot of good ones. Powers 25 at Dark Horse is great. Like I said, his autobiography about his time behind the scenes working on the Spider-Man musical. Pretty cool. Bendis is back, baby. Could be fun. I don't know what he would do. I'm trying to think of what I would want him on. I think that he always did his best when he got to carve out a little corner that didn't have to be connected to everything else. When his New Avengers, sure, that did reinvigorate the Avengers line. It did. But I think his best stuff was when he was writing Jessica Jones or Ultimate Spider-Man, his own stuff that didn't have to interact with anything else. And he could really develop the characters at the pace that he felt that he wanted to and not be interrupted by crossovers. I would take him back on Daredevil if he wanted to do something like that. Was that Bendis? I didn't even know that was his thing, that he aged up Jonathan Kent. I think that they've made some good use out of teenager John Kent, though. I'm still not convinced that Ultimate Spider-Man is continuing in a few months once they get to Ultimate Endgame. They've announced absolutely nothing for the Ultimate line continuing after this. I can understand that. He's got a very specific way of writing dialogue, but having just read the most recent Powers, I felt that was natural and organic. So I think his best stuff is honestly in crime fiction and in mystery stuff. Daredevil and Jessica Jones within Marvel are my favorite stuff. But outside of that, when he's done books like, well, of course, Powers, but he also just did another one, like a crime book. Oh, something along the lines of like, it's not this word, but it's like a prodigy or something like that. I can't even remember all of a sudden. But I like his crime stuff. Go back to like, Goldfish and Torso. Masterpiece. Thank you. I thought Masterpiece was really, really cool. Masterpiece. So, I don't know if I've ever read Bendis trying to do horror. That's an interesting idea. That's an interesting idea. But I think he does really well with crime stuff. I do. Keep going. Marvel's blind bags are going to include original art. This is an example of that by Pepe Larraz. So Marvel had previously announced, actually back at San Diego Comic-Con, that they've got this new line of blind bags that'll happen for Ultimate Endgame. They're calling it the True Believers Blind Bag Program. Fair. This is going to be their first time doing blind bags. First one is going to be Ultimate Endgame #1, December 31st. I say first one. They haven't announced others, but it's their first time doing it. So this week, Marvel announced that in addition to all the variant covers that we knew about, a lot of top-tier artists got it, there's a chance that you could actually pull a cover with an original sketch and signature. That's a pretty appealing thing to have out there. This is like the old McDonald's Monopoly game where you might just get a winning sticker. Somebody's going to get it. The artists contributing sketches include Leinil Francis Yu, Peach Momoko, Mark Bagley, Ron Lim, Pepe Larraz, and some others that they haven't mentioned yet. I don't know. As somebody that's a sucker for blind bag toys and now blind bag comics, I just am. I'm a sucker for them. I think it's a little fun to be surprised. The idea that you could actually pull original art, it's pretty exciting. It's pretty exciting. I'm not going to treat it like I would the lottery, like where I'm like, oh, if I don't win, if I don't pull that, then I got nothing. No, I got the comic. I got the fun of the anticipation. But yeah, just to be clear, you're right. The Monopoly game was famously rigged for a few years. It's basically why they don't bother doing it anymore. The luster wore off. But I don't know. The idea of potentially getting that is enough to excite me to get a blind bag. I'm not going to try to like rig my odds by I'm going to buy 5 from the store. That doesn't do enough for me. But personally, I'll get one. Well, that's fair too, because if they cost $20, then I rescind everything I said. But if it's 5 to 6 or something, yeah, I'll do it. Scalpers are going to be ruining this from the jump. Feels like it's so rare that it would be a little hard, but I don't know. I think this week on comic book shelves at stores is going to be the Mark Spears Monsters blind bag that he did. That'll probably be pretty popular. I think it's fun. I get that some people think that it's just a gimmick, and it is a gimmick, but some gimmicks I like. If you go back to the glow-in-the-dark Ghost Rider issue, that's a gimmick cover that I love. I got burned out when Marvel was like, any issue that was like a multiple of 25 or a #1, they put the holographic prism stuff effects on it. That got old. But the occasional die cut or glow in the dark cover, if it was like well thought out and executed, I liked some of those gimmicks. I just did. Wolverine issue 50, I think it was. It might have been 75, but I'm pretty sure it was 50. Has like a cardstock cover of files on Wolverine's history, and there are 3 claw slashes through it. So it was die cut. I thought that was pretty cool back then. Yeah, like Silver Surfer, actually making him silver and reflective, I thought that was cool. Guardians of the Galaxy 25 with like a holographic background, or Fantastic Four with like a prism background, made a lot less sense. But some of them were good. And so I'm not against the gimmick cover if it's still priced fair and it makes sense for the art. The Spectre also, yeah, I know they had at least one. I didn't know if they had multiple, and it was good. Turok #1, of course. You love your Turoks, don't you? Supposedly, yes, they are. Here's the thing. For Marvel, there could be a good long tail effect to this, because you put out 5 to 10 of these, and those people that get them go on social media, that's probably going to blow up a little bit, and they'll get a lot of news coverage, at least locally, if nothing else. Don't apologize for being correct. Gunn said there's some foreshadowing in the intro, and I believe they did that in season 1, Dance 2, with the butterflies. Exactly. So, am I overthinking it? Possibly. But personally, I think I'm right. No matter what anybody says. Right now, I think I'm right. Thank you. Is there going to be some more Marvel DC? I mean, they've already hinted that there probably will be some more Marvel DC crossover stuff in 2026. Well, here's like an indication of what it could maybe be. Okay. So, the Eclipso #1 with the gem is one of the examples of a gimmick cover that I do not like, because if you put that in your box, it would just damage the book in front of it. Not a good gimmick. All right. So what else? Next year is going to be the 50th anniversary of the Marvel DC crossover Superman Spider-Man. Pretty big crossover book. One person seems to think it's going to get a sequel for the anniversary. Ready to rock and roll and party every day. Thank you. Worth the super chat. That's pretty good. Thank you. Rob Liefeld posted this to Twitter back on 9/17, but I didn't catch it. He wrote, Deadpool Batman does a pretty great job of whetting the appetite for the 50th anniversary of Superman Spider-Man, which I'm pretty certain is going to be announced any day for release in 2026. I think Pepe Larraz is drawing it, or at least one of them. We will see. Well, obviously, Liefeld has more connections than the rest of us, so he could be right. That does, a lot of that information lines up. A lot of it lines up. Hey, thank you for this. Let's see. Bendis should write a modern Prometheus, Frankenstein's monster story, where the monster is a PI solving cases that reflect on different aspects of humanity. And Adam's, what does it mean to be human? He could probably do a great job on something like that. That is not a bad suggestion at all. So I don't know about, as specific as Pepe Larraz or anything like that, but 50th anniversary, and Marvel DC has said that they're going to do some other stuff together in 2026. Neither of these characters were used in the Batman Deadpool backups. It makes a lot of sense. Pepe Larraz, if you don't know, he's one of the most in-demand artists that Marvel has right now. They've currently got him drawing Amazing Spider-Man, but he also had posted this Superman a long time ago to his Instagram. And I think that's a pretty classic-looking Superman. Very energetic Spidey. If they could get Larraz to draw it, I'd definitely pick that up. And if they do too many, I get it. It could get old. I think they're being pretty careful in one sense. You know, they did these little backups in Batman Deadpool to hit and miss effect, but they could have released all of those as one-shots and made a lot more money probably. But it might also kill interest long-term if they were releasing too much all at once. Pepe's great, though. Larraz is Marvel's best artist. You mean like right now of who they've got? I'd put him way up at the top of who Marvel is using on a regular basis, way up at the top. I think DC has a lot of fantastic artists right now. Marvel does have good artists, but yeah, I'd put them right towards the top. Thanks, Mike. How is Larraz going to find the time if he's also filling in a blind-bagged comic cover? Well, he's already drawn it, hasn't he? We just saw it. So, I don't know. I bet, by the way, you must get a pretty healthy paycheck for giving Marvel one of those original covers for them to insert into their blind bag program. They have to make a pretty good penny off of that, since you can't sell the original art yourself, and they know what the value there is. I agree. They should reprint JLA Avengers. It's either that or Teen Titans X-Men that, in my opinion, is the best crossover that Marvel and DC did. Either JLA Avengers or Teen Titans X-Men. One of those two are, in my opinion, their best crossovers. The Wolverine game trailer debuted. Gave us a few little bits of information. I think it looks like a fun game, I'll say that. And Insomniac won me over with their Spider-Man games. So yeah, Insomniac released its first trailer, gave us a few bits of info. First of all, look at the game cover. They hired Jock, an actual comic book artist, instead of just using, something generic or that. They hired an actual comic book artist. I think that's cool. I think it's good art. I think it sells it. I'm glad they hired a comic book artist to do something like that. It's voiced by actor Liam McIntyre, Australian or New Zealand? I don't know. I think he's from Australia. He played Spartacus in the Stars TV show after the original actor passed away. He also played Weather Wizard on Flash a few times. Interesting choice. He's a good actor. I do think he's a good actor, actually. Some of the locations that we saw represented in the trailer included Canada. Sure, that's where he's from. Japan. Very cool. Wolverine has some great history in Japan. And Madripoor. I'm glad they included that. Madripoor is very important to Wolverine. And some of the villains we saw represented included Omega Red, Mystique, and a gigantic Sentinel. I'm sure that there will be more. In fact, I'm not 100% sure, but some of the enemies that he went up against could be Reavers. In other words, cyborgs. I think that could make sense, so that he could slice and dice people without it getting too gory. But I don't know. Oh, I didn't know that McIntyre had done other voice acting roles. I liked Jedi Fallen Order, but I didn't realize that he was in that. That's really cool. Oh, Reavers are confirmed. I didn't know that. I believe you, though, because what I was watching in the trailer, I was like, I think that's the game's take on Reavers. I think that would make a fair amount of sense for Mr. Sinister to show up, especially if the Reavers are involved. I think he's used them before. Cole, Macon, and Reese. Yep. And Bone Crusher. And who else? Boy, they haven't used the Reavers in forever. I mean, of course, there was Donald Pierce, the first non-mutant member of the Hellfire Club, and Lady Deathstrike, technically, Lady Deathstrike. But there was one or two other Reavers. The Reavers should be used a lot more. I think the Reavers are cool as hell. I loved when Larry Hama used them. I loved when Mark Silvestri drew them. I don't know. Pretty Boy, that's right. Skullbuster? I thought it was Skull Crusher, but maybe it is Skullbuster. It's been a long time since I read the Reavers. I heard the regeneration works based on how many combos and how much damage you do to the Reavers and other enemies. Oh, that would be a clever way to do it. That would actually be really smart. Like, it would incentivize, it wouldn't necessarily punish you for being bad at them, but it could reward you for being good at them. Dude, Silver Samurai is underrated. He is a great villain. Got a code of honor, got an interesting power set. Bonebreaker. Skullbuster and Bonebreaker. That sounds right. Anyway, if you guys don't know, I think the Reavers are cool. And in my opinion, they got one of the biggest wins in X-Men when they beat the holy hell out of Wolverine and crucified him. If you've ever seen that famous Mark Silvestri cover of X-Men with Wolverine crucified on an X, that was the Reavers that beat him and did that to him. I feel like that's a pretty big win for a bad guy, and that they should be used a little bit more. They're going to be in Spider-Man Brand New Day? Sure. That could be fun. Image announced something that sounds really, really cool. A comic shop exclusivity window. What does that mean? Well, this week, Image Comics sent out a letter to comic book retailers, and they said that they're instituting a 27-day window for their products to be exclusively available in comic book stores. Here's part of what they wrote, the most relevant part. Beginning with December 24th, 2025, on-sale titles, direct market retailers will have a 27-day exclusivity window to sell all Image Comics collected editions and original graphic novels before those same titles go on sale at book market retailers and digital vendors. That's rewarding comic shops in a big way. Keep your fingers crossed that someday Lego decides to include him in a Marvel game, because that's the only way I see Forbush Man making an appearance. But good for you, Image Comics, working closely with comic book retailers to give them a window to make their sales and not have to compete with something like a big box store. They continued to explain why they did this. They basically said there are changes in supply chain logistics where bookstores are now asking for their merchandise ahead of their on sale date. And it just had Image looking at it and going like, okay, well, that's the new way that they need it done. But that doesn't mean that that's the day we dictate it's going to go for sale. So fine, you'll get your stuff in time, just like you asked for. But we're going to also reward our comic book store partners by giving them that, like, basically almost a full month window to sell this stuff before Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart, whoever has it for sale. Not bad. Forbush Man was in Lego Marvel Superheroes too? Well, there we go. I didn't remember that. This feels almost like the comics version of films in cinemas before they're on disc and streaming. I think I like it for the longevity of shops. I think it makes sense. Let's, exactly like Mike is describing here. Let's do that. There should be a window for comic book stores, then a window for maybe digital, and then maybe the big box stores. You know what I'm saying? Like, have it like go for like reward the most engaged people and that chain of distribution that supports the industry the most. I don't know why they don't do it this way, but it's pretty amazing. I'm sorry I didn't hear that news. I'm really impressed with Image. I think that's awesome. I think that'll help. I don't see a downside. Finally, let's talk about some indie stuff that I'm excited about. First of all, Arachnid Enforcer launches this week, October 1st. Can you guys hear the music from this, or is it just video? Look at that. No, can't hear it. That's fine. It's not saying too much. Just that this is going live October 1st. So this week, folks. And what is it? 48 pages, It's a Halloween-inspired R-rated superhero adventure by Jim Mahfood. Look at this incredible Punker Mike video with action figures and stuff. That's Gangster Boogie, the sidekick to Arachnid Enforcer. I've got a link in the description below if this is your kind of thing. I think it looks like a blast. DC should 100% make a Gem World JRPG video game. Yeah, Gem World. Backing this is like saving the planet. That Arachnid jerk threatened to break my head open if I didn't give him protection money. That sounds like Arachnid Enforcer. Yes, movie critic Jim Mahfood also does a few comic books here and there. Another thing that just looked a little interesting, depends on let me just acknowledge this. Yeah, Punker Mike has, I mean, he's just such an interesting creative guy. Look him up on Instagram if you don't know, folks. Does art, does sculpture, does, custom kit bash type action figures and stuff, and does an amazing stop motion, does interesting edits and stuff. It's really, really cool. But yeah, I think that Jim's got a really fun looking comic here. And I love that it's Halloween themed. I just think that that plays to a lot of Jim's sensibilities. And I just, you know what? I've watched this a bunch and I only just noticed that there are video cassette tapes in the background for Trash Movie Bonanza. I somehow had not missed that. I hadn't seen that before. So I think that looks like a lot of fun. I just wanted to highlight that this is going live this week, because I do understand, folks, that crowdfunded campaigns are a hustle. So I also thought I'd mention a Man-Bat student film. These people just emailed me and I was like, you know what? That still looks fairly professional. And it's an interesting idea. It's about two friends looking into the urban legend of the Man-Bat. So it's called Bring the Man-Bat to Life. It's on Indiegogo. There's the link if that's your kind of thing. Just sort of different and could be fun. And I guess that's about it for news. So let me shift over to the comic book reviews section of things, folks. Let's see. I'll also just say Wednesday is the big launch day. I appreciate your support. Jim, I think you're going to do well. You shared a lot of images on the Kickstarter page. I've seen a lot of images. I think it looks like a blast. I think it looks like a really great project. Really great comic. Good reminder. Well, I share this channel with Jim to do the Trash Movie Bonanza episodes. And it's only fair that I mention some of his stuff. There's so many movies that I want to watch for Trash Movie Bonanza. I've been having a hard time picking what we should do next. I've got a lot of things, a lot of ideas, but I think we should probably do something, some good schlock horror for October. So, we've got New York Comic-Con to get past. I don't know if we'll be able to do 2 episodes in October, but we'll at least do 1 horror episode, because it's Halloween. Everybody gotta have a little bit of fun on Halloween. You may remember that from our last Halloween episode, Hack-O-Lantern. I'm still trying to forgive Jim for making me watch that. All right, folks, let's get into the reviews of the week.
Let's review.
Review it.
The review.
The reviews are in. I repeat, the reviews are in.
Go to your reviews.
What? Speaking of bad reviews.
Don't worry about that review.
Let's review all the facts.
All right, gentlemen, let's review.
Before we do, let's review.
Those reviews really came out fast.
Maybe we can review some right now?
I'm not going to review all that again.
Now let's review.
Not my worst review.
Let's review, shall we? To review.
I think I've reviewed about as much as I can.
All right, here we go. Got some comics to look at. Oh, I was just a big country lawyer, not one of them flashy city lawyers you heard so much about. Terror tunes? Okay. Skinbreaker. Rewatch Hack-O-Lantern again? You're the devil's son. Oh, and I just did this, like the devil's horns, but in Hack-O-Lantern, they actually keep doing this, which is sign language for I love you. All right. Let me go ahead and start off with, I think, what probably had the most hype before launch out of what came out this week, and that is Skinbreaker issue 1. Now, I got the main cover by David Finch. It's a really well-composed, exciting cover. If they had it, trust me, I would have gotten the Tony Moore one. I'll always do anything I can to get a Tony Moore comic in my hands. So, I had Robert on Comic Tropes a couple weeks ago, I think, and we talked about this book, and apparently David Finch has been illustrating this, taking his time for like about 8 years. And I'll tell you something, when you open it up to some of these big splash pages and look at not just the level of detail, but the thoughtfulness of composition, the texturing, the depth of field, there's a lot of choices that are being made here by the artist that you can just glance at and get the information you need, right? And it's just amazing to me, though. You look at this, and this is just a work of art. Let me pull out a little bit there. And this thing, if you just sold the original art for this in a gallery, this would probably go for thousands. And it's just bonkers to me that in comics, people are expected to churn out at least 20 of these every month, 20 pages, It's just strange to think about. But Finch has done a lot of great comics. And I'm not just saying this. I think this is some of his most beautiful artwork I've ever seen. I really do. It's just so clear. The storytelling really excels because he's always been a very detail-oriented artist, and that's very pleasing to the eye. Good hatching, good shading. It's very pleasing to the eye. But let's even just I wasn't even planning on any particular page, but I'm looking at this one. It's right in front of me. And what's got the most space? This panel in the middle where they're jumping. And how is it framed? Finch has very cleverly put some trees to sort of border it and left all this negative space to highlight the form so that if we just blacked everything out here, put this all in silhouette, we could still read what's happening here instantly. We'd see that jump and the person climbing behind with a little less energy. We'd see the motion and the impact, and it's sold in that moment. And everything else just supports the storytelling, but it's still flowing. There's left to right action, and there's vaguely details in sort of a nice Z pattern. The amount that's filled in versus the amount that has less information. It's really good storytelling. So it could be easy to get hung up on just looking at a random page and go, oh, some gorgeous detail, right? Some gorgeous detail. But there is more than that. There's a lot more than that. There's a lot of great choices where we're using circles, we're using triangles, and we're using alternating lines to create tension and action. I think that there's some great creature design because this is on basically an alien planet. I think Robert has created some interesting mythology where these characters, this alien race, they're born with this sort of skin coating, okay? And when they're very young, they're put in front of the sun and they've got this sword that the chief of the tribe always controls. And when the sun shines through the sword, it either will like sort of weaken you and maybe even kill you, or it sort of makes that outer layer of skin break off and you emerge stronger. And the conflict in this is that the obvious heir to the throne does not want to displace the leader because he really respects him, but it's time for this leader to step down. He's weaker now. And there's a big challenger who's just a big dumb brute. And he probably wouldn't be the right choice to lead the tribe. I think that this is something Robert should get some credit for. When you've got maybe a supernatural story involving a tribe that doesn't have modern or futuristic technology, you could fall into some dangerous tropes that, I think 100 years ago, 20 years ago even, you might not know, but you could like just basically be taking the interesting parts of, say, a Native American civilization and then just ignoring any of the darker parts to their history. But I don't think it falls into that. I think that that he leaned more into creating some fantasy elements here with how things work. I think that second skin and the Skinbreaker sword are pretty good examples of that, which helps keep it in the realm of fantasy and makes it more enjoyable. We don't have to like feel like it's too close to the real world. Instead, we're focused on the goals of the characters and their relationships as a family, and with the pressures of like wanting to be a leader, but not wanting to displace your elders. I think that that's some pretty relevant, meaty stuff. Folks, I think this is one of the best comics that Robert's done in a few years. And I say that on top of really enjoying Battle Beast these days. I think Robert's leveling up as a writer. He could be at a stage in his career with all the success that I think he could fall into just regurgitating the same ideas, the same jokes, the same stuff. I think instead he's pushing himself forward. I really do. Am I biased? I guess I could be. But I'll also say this. I think I have a unique perspective in that I've obviously been reading Robert's stuff since his days self-publishing. And I've been reading it very closely because, I proofread his comics for decades. And I would even be honest, I got a little burned out by the end of Walking Dead on his patterns of writing dialogue. I just got a little burned out on that aspect. Not of the story, but just like I knew how people would talk and I expected it. I feel like I'm getting something different these days in Battle Beast and especially in Skinbreaker. I really recommend this to you because it's a fun story. Even if the story doesn't sound like it has appeal, I think this is some of David Finch's best artwork that I've ever come across. And I think that there's stuff you could learn from it if you're an artist yourself, or appreciate if you're an appreciator of narrative storytelling or just nice illustration. There's a lot to get out of this. And obviously I'm giving it a very high recommendation, but I think it's earned it. I really do. Robert got where he is, yes, because he's a good writer, but he also is a hard worker. He puts out a lot of stories, and he's easy to work with. Yeah, exactly. Sometimes I think that that's interesting because Avatar does have a lot of sci-fi elements to it, but some of it just doesn't, like, especially the first one of the two feels like kind of painful in terms of how it appropriates some cultural elements. And then Pocahontas, the Disney version, that's one of my least favorite Disney movies because it just sanitizes everything way too much. It is pretty. I met David Finch at a Wizard World Con in Chicago back in 2007. Got to chat with him for a while. Really cool dude. I've never spoken with him. I've enjoyed his work, but this is my favorite. And I don't say that lightly, but this is my favorite. I have not played that game. Sorry. Let me No, you know what? I want to go to this because I really loved this too. Boy, did I love this. This is the second issue of Escape, and it's a very obvious World War II allegory, but none of the things have the names like the United States or Germany, etc. And all the characters are animals. That said, reading through this, you're never distracted. It never takes you out of the story that these are talking animals. Instead, it just adds to the characterization. For that, I credit a lot of it to the artist for giving it, like, personality and weight. In fact, this is some of the closest talking animal artwork that I've seen that would compare favorably to something like Black Sad, which I consider exceptional artwork. Exceptional. But Daniel Acuna is definitely one of the best in the business. Some really, really nice line work and some really expressive characters. He's also never afraid to, put a character in shadow or draw them fairly small when it's necessary, when it just tells the story. But there's always going to be somewhere on each page that there is an important establishing shot, at least one important establishing shot, and you understand where people are in relation to each other. This, story-wise, went in a direction I wouldn't have expected. In issue 1, the good guys are planning to do an airstrike on the bad guys' gigantic cannon. That's their sort of one sci-fi gimme element, is that the bad guys have this gigantic cannon that could end the war. It's essentially like the equivalent of having a nuclear bomb technology-wise, but it's a cannon. And the good guys are going to try to do an airstrike on it. They get shot down. And as far as we know right now, it's just the captain of the plane, Milton, that survives, a bear. He's a very jaded guy. And I really thought that issue 2 would just begin with him trying to make his way through the city now that he's been shot down, trying to blow up the cannon. Instead, we get a huge flashback explaining his relationship and meeting the woman that would become his wife and how they get pregnant. So they're going to have a baby, and how that's the motivation for him to have become a soldier. Because otherwise you're like, this is one of the most jaded guys out there. Why would he ever put his life on the line when you consider just how, what words am I using for beyond jaded? All of a sudden my words are eluding me. Well, I'll continue with the review. I can't think of a good word. So, story-wise, it surprised me, but it interested me. Now I care about Milton even more than I did out of issue 1. And I did talk in the review last month about how I loved the dialogue and the debates that Milton was having with his crewmates while they were, entering a war zone. But now I really understand the sacrifices that he's already making. And I want him to survive. And the odds are just totally against him, because he's one man with 6 bullets behind enemy lines, and he's going to try to get to that cannon with some C4 that he's got in his backpack, and he's still going to try to finish the mission, because otherwise, what kind of a world would his son exist in? But he's very, depressive in the sense that he's like, I'm probably going to die, and my son's never going to know who I am, and I'm just going to be a name in a book. It means nothing. Disaffected is good, but it wasn't quite the word I'm looking for. Yeah, he is a bear. That's fair. Cynical. Cynical was the word I was looking for. I don't know why that couldn't come to me. Need to have more coffee, apparently. Cynical. He is cynical. But not in that doesn't make him annoying or anything. It's just who he is. In fact, it adds to his personality. He's got a really big personality. Just gorgeous, folks, in terms of storytelling. And some really fantastic dialogue. There's a few parts where Rick Remender has, narration boxes. that are establishing a scene or getting you into the head of a character, but he doesn't lean into it too much in this. And I think that that's a good choice. I think that that stuff can slow a story down when it's not interesting enough. He has to have some of that because a lot of the time Milton will be by himself when he's behind enemy lines. But for this flashback, it really does give you a lot of his personality by the dialogue. And I just like that he kind of like was faced with how bad the situation was and finally realized that nobody else is going to fix this problem. And when it was just him, who cares? You know, he could fly up in the skies and pretend like the problems down on the ground don't affect him. But with a kid coming, he's got the responsibility that he wants to do whatever he can to keep the world a good place. It's beautiful, folks. It really is. This is something special. Both by Image Comics, by the way. Two of the best books that I read this week. Easily. Really, really good. I doubt I'll go into as many thoughts on the rest of these, but Beneath the Trees, Rite of Spring issue 3, again changes the story up. The first issue, we mostly saw from the perspective of a woman whose brother had been killed by the serial killer from the first issue. In the second issue, we mostly followed Samantha, who we know it's important for the story to know that she's a serial killer, but she pretends to just be a normal person running a business. And it's set in like the early 90s as the internet begins to become a thing and information is getting shared between people much more easily. And she realizes the world has become smaller. It's not going to be as easy to just hide in plain sight as a killer, that people are going to figure out little details of things she's done in the past and put things together if she's not extra careful. That was issue 2. Now issue 3 does a little bit of both of those, but also gives us a flashback to her growing up with her parents and her relationship with them and trying to balance her goals of just this weird need to kill. Each issue has focused on a different thing, and it's an interesting structure for a story like this, because the first volume was much more straightforward. You know, it was a game of cat and mouse. It was animals, and it was, in this case, a bear and like a bear and a mouse? Yeah, it was a bear and a mouse story. The second one talks about some deeper things like the world getting smaller and how the world affects you and how your outlook on life shapes you as a person. So there's some really interesting psychological stuff that's happening in this. And I think that that's a good idea because ultimately you can only go so gory in a comic as far as like a scare, but psychologically dealing with like a disturbed individual and getting into their headspace, that is something you can do with the written word and with visuals. And it's very disturbing. I think Beneath the Trees is, I never would have expected that it needed a sequel, but it's definitely living up to the very high bar that it's set in its original story. The Care Bear Stare. Lots of bears in these comics, yes. I love this comic. I love this series. It's fascinating how careful the creator choices are in this series. Everyone is deliberate. Very, very careful, yes. Oh my God, yes. The scene with the earrings. I won't go into it, but yep. Just a clever little bit that told us so much about who Sam is and the lengths she'll go to do what she feels she needs to do. I think that there have always been excellent comics and garbage comics in any era, but I will say that there's a lot of great comics out right now. It's great. It's great. And if you've read the first series, you might get a little bit more, but this one does sort of do a small time jump forward and it gives you all the relevant information. So Rite of Spring is definitely enjoyable in and of itself. I just think that if you know a little bit about the character's history from the first one, it can fill in some blanks that you might otherwise have. She's a fascinating character. It really is a lot like, say, Dexter, but she's worse. It's worth picking up, and I don't think it's a hard book to find the first volume of. The dad does look a lot like that character, by the it was good. All 3 issues so far have been fantastic. So those are 3 exceptional comics that I've read through. This was fun. Twilight Zone. It's back in comic book form. Great creative team on this. Dan Waters, writer that I've really enjoyed. Morgan Beam, she's a great artist. And if you have never seen a Twilight Zone or somehow missed what it's about, it always just tells a story with pretty ordinary people, but then something changes, either science fiction or supernatural, and there's like a twist at the end. And usually somebody either, gets their comeuppance because they deserve it, or there's something really tragic that happens, and you just sort of thank goodness that the world isn't like that. Okay. Twilight Zone's great. This definitely hits the Twilight Zone vibes. In fact, I read through this really quickly, but there's a really rich billionaire who doesn't want to die, and he has had scientists working for ages to create potential cure for aging and sickness, and they've seemingly done it with a virus that basically has your cells constantly reset. They forget the problems that they have. Like they forget that they're sick or something and just start fresh. It's just believable enough that I'm like, yeah, we've seen that there are cells that you can like program to behave the way we want them to. We know that there are those like initial cells you're born with that can basically be like written to be anything that we get when we're babies. I'm not a biologist. I'm not a scientist. I forget this stuff all the time. But there's enough stuff I've read in the past where I go, okay, I sort of get where they're, yeah, stem cells. Thanks, folks. Stem cells is what I was getting at. Sorry. They don't use that term in here. That's why it wasn't coming to me right away. But there's enough of it to believe in. Now, if I went any further, I'd basically be spoiling things. Let's just say that there are some great twists to the story. And yeah, you know what? I can't really show you any of the images without sort of giving away some of the twists to it. But it's really good story. It feels like Twilight Zone. And I think that that's the biggest compliment I can give it, because I think Twilight Zone sets itself a very high bar, especially the original series. But there are things to appreciate about like the UPN version, or the more recent, what was one of the streaming services had a version. Of course, there's the live action movie that has some really sad history to it, but there's a few of the stories in it that are fantastic. Twilight Zone, the movie, first of all, the Joe Dante segment, Joe Dante, the director of Gremlins and a million other great things, Small Soldiers, etc. Great director. His segment of Twilight Zone is fantastic. Some of the best Twilight Zone out there. The segment that has John Lithgow recreating the role that William Shatner made famous, where he's on a plane and he can see a gremlin out on the plane wing. No, I'm not talking about Black Mirror, although I love Black Mirror. Yeah, Jordan Peele hosted a version of Twilight Zone that was on one of the streaming services. Was it Paramount Plus? And it wasn't as good, but it was still good. Yeah, George Miller's in it, Joe Dante. The only sad thing is, folks, if you don't know, there was also a director that basically had some kids on set that weren't documented, weren't supposed to be there at this hour, and he had a helicopter like fly way too low for a stunt while these explosions in water were going off. It crashed. People died. It's ugly as hell. It's a horrible story. Just a horrible tragedy, to be honest. Horrible tragedy. So the movie is sort of like blemished by one of the stories, like the behind the scenes stuff that happened. But at the same time, that, you can look at the George Miller and Joe Dante segments and go, well, they had nothing to do with that. You know, they did their own thing, and they're great segments. So if you can sort of separate that, yeah, you can appreciate it. Anyway. Yes, Forrest Whitaker. I don't think it was on Sci-Fi. I think it was on like UPN. Forrest Whitaker hosted one too, though. Twilight Zone's always been strong, was my only point. Twilight Zone's always been pretty strong. The original is fantastic, hosted by Rod Serling. I think that Dan Waters and Morgan Beam captured the vibe really, really well. It's a great Twilight Zone story. So if you're the kind of person that's enjoyed Twilight Zone and you want a new original story that feels authentic, they've done a good job with this. It's really fun. I'm looking forward to seeing what else they do, because there's going to be different creators. And I like that. I think that works well. Tell a full story within a comic and treat it like an anthology where there's now going to be another creative team. Absolute Wonder Woman, some great art by Hayden Sherman. Boy, Hayden has been in the industry for a while and done some great comics, but I think he's really making his name with Absolute Wonder Woman and really going for it. I noted, months ago, I loved the decisions for how he would lay out panels and do different borders to indicate different things. Like when the story is about emotional stuff with the characters and it not dangerous, the panel borders tend to be soft and round. But when there's action or there's evil villains and stuff, it tends to be sharp and angular. It continues to do some really interesting stuff there. Like this. This is like a scene where the hero and the villain are maybe finding some common ground. And it becomes a little more round as compared to this fight where they're punching each other. You got really hard lines. There's also some great mythology here. What's happening, for instance, with Wonder Woman having this trident made of water that seems to have superpowers. Well, that seems like could easily tie into Aquaman. But guess what? Aquaman, not mentioned, doesn't show up. However, there is another Justice League character that shows up in the final pages of this. I won't say who it is. I'm not here to spoil that for you, but I'll say I wasn't expecting it. I'm absolutely fascinated by where it could go. And this issue by Kelly Thompson as well does some great stuff with the ongoing threat of classic Wonder Woman villain, Dr. Poison. Dr. Poison, in this version, she exists as like a sentient cloud of poisonous gas that the government houses within this very simple suit. And she's like, I'll keep working for you, but you got to get me a better suit. You got to get, and yeah, things are going to go really bad for the government at some point. They're working with the wrong person. Oh, the design elements beyond the great artwork are just like help raise this to be appreciated on another level. Dr. Poison also was in the first Wonder Woman movie. Somewhat accurate to the comics. She's kind of like Vapor of the UFOs, but also there's a Hellboy character on the BPRD, like a German scientist that's in a suit kind of like that, and I'm forgetting his name, but whatever. Oh, they're definitely trying to keep her in a very simple suit because they don't want her to be able to do too much but she's negotiated for a better suit, and I'm sure that's going to bite them in the butt. Last issue was very emotional as Wonder Woman met another Amazon for the first time in her life. This turns everything we know about the history of the Amazons on its head. Everything that we've sort of been told thus far, we realize has been told from a skewed point of view, and that there's more going on with the island of Themyscira and Amazons than we thought. So it's definitely changed up Wonder Woman's history. I love that this version of Wonder Woman was literally raised in hell by somebody that's traditionally one of her villains. And instead of that making her a darker, like brooding version of the character, she's still the same empathetic, loving, and heroic person. And she's just made the world around her a little better. She made hell better as compared to hell ruining her. I kind of love that. That's thumbs up. This wasn't necessarily my favorite issue of the regular Wonder Woman run, although I will say 25 issues in plus some spin-offs and stuff. Tom King is definitely making a mark on, his Wonder Woman run, and I like it overall. But we've sort of gotten past the first big bad, Sovereign, and this one's starting to set up a new villain, and it isn't Mouse Man, who seems ridiculous. Instead, it's we're hinting at a new villain called the Matriarch. Whatever, none of that hit too hard for me personally. It could still work. It just didn't hit yet. It didn't land. But I will say that all of the artwork is fantastic. Daniel Sampari does some great stuff to make this like a Wonder Woman that can look both beautiful and kind of tough and big and strong. So that's really cool. There's also some like flash forwards drawn by Jorge Fornes that are interesting, but it's an okay issue. I would say the thing I liked most about it was the artwork. I think the ability to draw a character consistently like this might not seem flashy, right? This isn't as flashy as a big action scene, but here's the thing. To draw a character consistently, that is skill. That is definitely skill. And to then on top of that, layer in some subtle emotions instead of like, a big surprise or big anger. That stuff's not as hard. It's fun. That's the fun stuff of being an artist. Being an artist and drawing somebody just break a little bit and like to try to focus on those emotions. That's work. And so I'm really impressed with Daniel Sampari on this. I also am a little burned out on that. That's totally fair, and I will catch up at some point on Absolute Martian Manhunter. I will say Absolute Green Lantern and Absolute Flash both looked pretty, but didn't quite interest me a lot. But personally, I will say I also am loving Absolute Batman. I really am. I think it's awesome. I was glad to see this book by James Stokoe come back. Orphan and the Five Beasts. There was a 1 5-issue series. This is the next one. It's a very manga-esque story, but it's told in a very American comics way, if that makes sense. This character is Mo, and she was raised to, be a fantastic fighter. But the guy that taught her, these 5 criminals or something, each took one of his techniques and became warlords. And she feels the need to wander around fighting them. There's supernatural crazy stuff, but there's also there's lots of good both Chinese and Japanese storytelling techniques at play here as far as monsters and fighting. I hope you guys like James Stokoe. If you do, if you've ever enjoyed anything by him in the past, I think you'll enjoy this. There's a bit of humor, there's a little bit of tongue-in-cheek, but there's also some extreme violence. It is, yes, it's plot-wise, it's very similar in some ways to Fist of the North Star. Not quite apocalyptic, though. I'll sort of throw that in. I loved it too. It's but it's serious enough. The overall story is serious enough. You didn't know this was a sequel? Huh. Well, I mean, it holds up on its own. But yeah, it's a sequel. Got to remember to read left to right. It's fun. Look at this. This guy's like an obnoxious, just sort of local police chief, right? Not like a high-level government employee or anything. And he's definitely throwing around the little bit of power that he has, trying to round up these bandits. And then Mo comes in from like off panel and just shoves a bow staff in his mouth here. I just love how exaggerated that is. You can just sort of imagine getting like poked in the mouth by some gigantic weapon. And then she just, really hurls him. That's so cartoony, but that's once things get into like the fighting territory, they go over the top, and I like it. I'm all for it. I'm all for it. Yeah, I can't wait to get to that issue. Can't wait. It's really fun. Was there anything else? Void Rivals. So this issue is also drawn by Connor Hughes, who is does he do his own coloring? Hold on. I think James Stocco does do the coloring in this. Let's see. Yep. Script, art, letters, and cover. Does everything. Does everything. And because he does even the letters and stuff, they really fit in. They never cover up important elements of the story because he's able to plan that out. And it really is laid out extra well. And the colors just do nothing but emphasize the art. Color-wise, this guy's getting surprised by people behind him. All of a sudden, for no reason, the background's like a really orangey red, a warm color, a hot color. Oh, surprise. Whereas this is supposed to be like a public bath or something, and it's very organic and natural, and so there's lots of greens laid in. And there's pretty gentle gradients, but it doesn't clutter up the artwork because he tends to use pretty subdued hues for the most part, pretty subdued hues. So there's just a little bit more to appreciate there. Layout of the lettering, decision on the coloring. Do you see how there's the opposites between the cool colors and the warm colors, and the warm colors can indicate action or strong emotion, whereas otherwise things are just sort of muted and natural because they're in a sort of remote hilltop area. He staples them too. Nice. But I was just about to talk about Void Rivals. Connor Hughes is the artist for a few issues before we get our next ongoing artist. But I got to say, Connor Hughes is a great artist. This hints at some really cool stuff. At first, I was looking at this, and in the story, it's called Void Rivals because there's a void, right? This black hole. And there's two different cultures that live on a ring around it. It's a ring planet, basically. And they're always at war. And their prophecy says if they're ever united, something bad will happen. So they've always warred. Well, in this issue, they finally start working together, and something starts to emerge from the void. And at first I was like, what are these, ships or something? And then I realized, no, those are the tips of fingers. Those are the tips of fingers. It's like a pinky, a thumb. It's a hand reaching out. This thing's bigger than a planet. The hand is about as big as the planet. We're talking. We've seen hints in the mythology to a dark god called Goliath. It's not Unicron, to be clear, even though this takes place within a shared universe, but Goliath. So there's something on the level of Unicron that's being held within this void. There's some really cool stuff with the characters that are not original to this story, like Pythona from Pythona from G.I. Joe meets Wheelie from Transformers. And this stuff is all just happening in the background of the bigger story. I love that. I love that it works in these weirdo characters that have never really been the main characters in anything, but they exist within some of that toy mythology, and now they're getting roles to play in this bigger story. I love the stuff they do with talk about somebody that's been a small character in a few issues of season 3 of Transformers. There was this character called Skuxoid, who was a bounty hunter, and Robert Kirkman has given him a background and an origin and a whole story where when he gets chopped into bits, each of them regrows into a new Skuxoid. So there's this humongous mythology around Skuxoid, and I actually care about him. It's crazy. Anyway, yeah, I wish Connor Hughes could stay on, because like this, there's this shot of one of the main characters, Solila, communing with a really powerful force, and it's hard for me to sort of like zoom in or anything, but the details on this gesture are gorgeous. I love the anatomy and the way the character almost looks to be floating in an ether because of how he illustrated the hair here. That's beautiful. It's really, really nice and charming. I would never have expected Void Rivals to work this well. It's crazy sci-fi bonkers stuff, but it's great. Robert has made Skuxoid one of the most interesting characters in Void Rivals. Maybe the most interesting one, and I'm not even exaggerating. A character that basically had almost nothing to him in the cartoon. You know, he was just an alien bounty hunter. We didn't really know much more. And he's given him a whole backstory. Look, so the last issue I read this week was Ultimate Spider-Man 21. And I got to say, initially, I wasn't sure if I liked Ultimate Spider-Man. It kind of won me over a couple issues in. But the last several haven't really hit for me all that hard. I guess I just don't care that much about Kingpin and his Sinister Six that run New York. I just don't care that much. But there's a lot of stuff with them backstabbing each other and working together and this, that, and the other. And I'm like, well, where's, you know, like there's the newspaper guys like Uncle Ben and J. Jonah Jameson, but they're working on this on Kingpin and his story. And then we've got Harry Osborn and Otto Octavius, and how are they going to fight back against Kingpin and his guys? And I'm like, where the hell's Spider-Man? No offense, but there needs to be more Spider-Man action. When Marco Cacchetto is drawing it, totally worth it because that's great art. But Spider-Man's barely in this comic when you think about it. And we finally get this version of Spider-Man that's legit interesting to see him as a mature adult with a healthy relationship with Mary Jane and a loving relationship with his children. And it's not all perfect because, you know, like they've all got their foibles and they've all got their own wants and desires. So there's conflict, but it's a really interesting dynamic. And instead, it just keeps getting sidetracked by too much time spent on the villains. Too much time spent on the villains, in my opinion. I find the world of the Ultimates fascinating, but I find it more fascinating when it's been done in one-off stories in the Ultimates, focusing on this one superhero, this one villain, this one character that's a normal person living in that world. Almost an anthology take on looking at the world that it's built. The Ultimate Spider-Man book, I don't hate it, but I don't love it. And in some ways, I feel like that's worse because I'm a little ambivalent about it. And I've stuck with it this long, and I'll just go ahead since it's only going to about issue 24 that we know for sure. Fine, I'll read 3 more issues. It's not bad, but it's just not that interesting. It's just not. I wish it was more interesting. So, let me briefly pause. I did a little sketch that I can turn into Arachnid Enforcer there. But let me... Out of all of these, what is the best comic this week? Well, it ain't that. Sorry. And a lot of these were really fun. I think I had a lot of positive things to say about these books. And it wasn't that one. Really cool comics. Really cool. Of course they get a recommend. But what was the best of the week? It's this. I just do this as like a challenge to myself. Like how do you determine what the best of something is? It's not easy, but it's going to be between these 3. And I really just I enjoyed all 3 of these a lot. I read through these and I was just like, oh, I'm reading something special. Each of these felt like this isn't just a great comic. This is something special. But folks, I'm just going to let you know. Skinbreaker. I think it's some of the best writing Robert's done lately. And it's definitely some of the best artwork by David Finch. Is the story itself that original? It's original enough. But the characterization and the artwork, the storytelling, the narrative structure, that's what impresses me the most about this. And just let me be clear. I hope you can afford more than 1 or 2 comics a week because Beneath the Trees, Rite of Spring, and Escape are both pretty spectacular comics. But if you can only get one, I guess I'd have to limit it to this. And it's great. It's really, really good. And I'm excited to come across a comic by somebody that I know that I love that much. It's a bummer to come across a comic by somebody that you know that you don't love. Let's see what I got here. So I thought I'd just really quickly work on inking an Arachnid Enforcer, since Jim's Kickstarter goes live this week. And while I do that, I could just sort of drone on about some of the comic book related shows and movies that are out there right now. I think I've said enough about Peacemaker. I might have one other opinion, a hot take in a little bit, but I'll give you a warning in case you think it would be spoilery. You know what I haven't seen yet, but I will see, is on Netflix, they've got a season 3 of Alice in Borderland. And I really liked the first 2 seasons of that. I thought that it kind of wrapped things up, but there is still precedent. There was like a manga sequel, a small one. And so there is material to mine for a season 3. No, I didn't know that Judd Winnick is doing a creator-owned children's comic called Hilo. I didn't know. You're coloring Arachnid pages right now. Well, thanks for doing that while you're watching me. Looking forward to seeing you in a week, buddy. I'm gonna turn this upside down for a minute. Yeah. There was another. I'm still behind on Dawn to Dawn. I've been so busy that I haven't been able to watch everything that I want to watch. So I haven't seen Dawn to Dawn in a little bit. I haven't finished season 2. I'm up to date on the comics, but not on the anime. There was something else, though, that was adapted. Besides, there was Peacemaker, there was Dawn to Dawn, there was Alice in Borderlands. I thought there was something else out there that's adapting comics. Why isn't it coming to me? Oh, yeah. I kind of expected something like that to happen. It was obvious that Chris just had a blind spot. And I think that is true, that you can see what you want to see. And that's why, even if it's a little over the top that he missed that This Is a Bad World, thematic and story-wise, it makes plenty of sense. I thought that there was something else that was being adapted. Oh, that's what I haven't seen. I haven't seen Gen V yet. Although a couple people told me that they like it so far. All right. Who wants to see Little Sister next week? Should I plan on heading to Mom's house after work? I say yes. I say that you should be my co-host next Monday. And at least monitor the chat and talk from off screen if you don't feel comfortable showing up on camera. But if you do, I think it would be fun to have the both of us. And I think that you'd have some opinions on a bunch of the news, even if you're not reading the specific comic or anything. I think that would be a lot of fun and be different. I'm all for it. I haven't seen Revival. I would love to binge that. I would love. Yep, I've got a sister. She's in Massachusetts, and I'm going to see her next Monday. Family tropes. Just to set some expectations, I think I should be able to do a version of the live stream next week. I'm not 100% sure what the technical way I'm going to do it is. I think I can take this camera. I probably won't have like quite as good a microphone, and I don't know if I'll be able to show a PowerPoint or not. We'll see. I think I might be able to. That would be funny if you could find some embarrassing pictures. I think that would be appropriate to share if we were together. So I haven't figured out like that, but I'll figure it out. So, but I'll do a show. I'll do a show because it'll be evening, and yeah, I think I'll do a show. But I'll just set the expectation that the next Monday, so 2 Mondays from now, I'm not going to be able to do a show because I will be traveling home that day. And it just like the timing just doesn't work. If I can do like a small show on like say a Tuesday or a Wednesday night, I will, but I think I work the next 2 evenings, so I probably can't fit it all in. I had to prioritize recently getting this Michael Golden episode done because it was taking a long time. Although I will say just real quick, I'm actually really proud of it. I think it's a good episode. I think it's one of my better ones. It doesn't always need to be longer for it to take longer to make. But anyway, now that I've finished that, maybe when I come back from my trip, I can fit in a mailbag episode because I do have some comics that were sent into the P.O. box, and that would be really fun to go through. Haunted Hotel is good. I'd love to see what is it, that like K-pop Demon Hunters show? Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, very kind of you folks. Wait, I think I did see what you're talking about. 911 is just a show where people like call in and they're like, I need the police. There's a shooter at the mall, right? Something like that. Or like, oh, my mom isn't breathing. And it's just about like first responders. But like, is the trailer you're talking about where they're like, the sky is falling and they're showing like asteroids, like devastating a city? I saw that. Yeah, that's so bonkers. I was like, this just does not fit. Ah, very nice puns. Thank you. A golden episode. Thank you. I appreciate it, folks. There's a lot to fit in there. I might be tired since I work at 10 before heading over. We'll give Mom a heads up. Yeah, I mean, I think by 8 o'clock, our mom is like dealing with a health thing, so she'll be too tired to be up by then anyway. So I might as well do something. Will I shoot something in NYCC? Probably not. You know, I've recorded. There was one year where I recorded a lot at New York Comic Con. I made essentially a game where my friends and I, we tried to see who could take the most pictures or video of the tropes or the cliche things you'd see at a Comic-Con. And then we added them up. But it didn't get that many views. Like, I don't know. Maybe it's just too different compared to what I normally do. And it does take a lot of my time, energy, and focus to be recording anything there. I mean, if I had, an employee that could follow me around recording, that would probably be pretty funny, I think. But I don't have anything like that. I don't have the employee or the equipment, so that's not happening. So I might record just a little bit that I can post on social media here or there, but I doubt I'll record a big video. You know what I might do? I am planning, though, on doing an episode about an aspect of Spider-Man. I may record some specific New York City footage for an upcoming Spider-Man episode. A collage. It would be so fun, I think, if here's what I would love to do, but I don't have the equipment for it. I don't know how to take care of it. But if I had, say, like, a GoPro that I could attach on like a rig, a harness, and have great Wi-Fi signal, I think that would be so fun to go through a humongous convention like New York Comic Con and live stream the whole thing. Just live stream the day. I would love to do something like that, but I don't have the equipment or the money to afford something like that. I mean, alternately, of course, you could just like try to record it, but again, you'd need like batteries and stuff. So you need equipment to sort of do what I'm describing, and I don't really have that kind of equipment. Anyway, just postulating about what I'd do if I could. Last year's New York Comic Con, Mrs. Mafood and I, Mr.? Is that what you meant? Mr. Mafood and I agreed you should totally host a panel there one of these days. You know, I would. I think it's weird. I see so many of my fellow comic book YouTubers that have, a comparable, sometimes even smaller subscriber base get asked to host panels and events. And I'm happy for them, to be clear. That's awesome. That's awesome. And I'm stunned. I've never been invited to host a panel at any of these shows or anything. I mean, I know I could just pitch like my own panel, like, hey, here's what it takes to do YouTube, but that's not what I'm about. I'm saying, like, isn't it surprising in some ways that like nobody ever says like, oh, we could use a host, like, Chris, are you going to be at this convention? Most of the details being added during inking. And I'm not like throwing anybody under the bus. It does seem a little odd to me that that's like never been something that anyone's approached me with. Because I'm like, well, who are they choosing for hosts? I don't know, or what's the criteria? I don't know. I was really happy where I think it was last year, Brad and Lisa from Comic Book Couples Counseling Podcast got to host the Eisners. I was like, great, that's a wonderful example. I think Sal from Comic Pop is hosting 2 to 3 panels at New York Comic Con in a week. I love Sal. I get along with him great. I get along with a lot of the comic book YouTubers. So I'm always like, like, nobody's ever said like, boy, we could use a host. I have no problem public speaking. Well, that's not true. I mean, sometimes I guess I'll think about it a little bit. But anyway. I hope that didn't sound too much like complaining, because I really wasn't complaining. It was more of just like, I don't know why. I would have expected it. Even if I didn't want to do it, I would have expected that I would have the sort of background that people would be looking for to host. Knowledge of comics, confidence, public speaking, an audience that's familiar with me. I would think that those are the things that you would need, right? I don't know what else you would need. But I think a lot of times they do have editors host these panels, and that makes sense too, to be clear. That makes sense to me too. Start my own awards show. There's enough awards for comics already, I think. I think that there are. Yeah. I like doing interviews, but I will say that I put a lot of pressure on myself to do interviews because I want to try to ask things that they haven't been asked before, but that also have something to do with what would be interesting to people and what would like not be too personal. So I put a lot of research into like how I'm going to approach an interview with somebody to make sure that I'm not just doing the same things that have been done over and over. I don't know. I like doing interviews. It's a good challenge. I get asked to do a lot of interviews for comic tropes specifically, and I get that. I do get that, like why people ask me all the time. Like I get asked by almost, it seems like anybody that has a Kickstarter for anything even tangentially related to comics, they do email me and they're like, I think it would be interesting if you had me on your show because you could talk to somebody that's never made it big or is doing it for the first time. And I'm like, yeah, everybody's got the same idea for like what would be interesting there. You know, like that. I don't think that sounds all that interesting. At least not again and again and again. And then I like, if you've looked, I talked to some people that like I know, and I want to help them in some ways, and I think it's interesting. So I've talked to Daniel Warren Johnson and Robert Kirkman recently. But look at the numbers. Both of those, like, very low views compared to what I got on videos before. Interviews just aren't really picked up by the algorithm on YouTube. So if I can't get lots of big views with Robert Kirkman or Daniel Warren Johnson, what am I going to get with somebody that nobody's ever heard of before that's trying to get money for a Kickstarter? So that's why I'm like, okay, well, here and there I could highlight an interesting project on my weekly show, one or two, if they were really special, right? I was like, okay, that looks a little interesting, I could highlight that. I can do a mailbag episode on this channel, but I can't do interviews on my main channel, like with people that aren't in the industry even. Like it just would, neither of us would benefit. Maybe you a little bit. Oh, that's kind of you. That's kind of you. Is my Peach Momoko interview my highest one? I don't check my numbers a whole lot, to be honest. It'll probably be up there. It's more than most interviews get because she doesn't do a lot of them, right? She doesn't do a lot of them. But I bet that my multi-part one with Robert Kirkman from a few years ago probably got more, because that we got into some interesting stuff there where he opened up about like his time with Marvel, for instance. Thank you for the compliments. I mean, but I'm talking, of course, to my most engaged audience members right now. So thank you. But yeah, I get it. Let's fill in a little bit of black to give this thing some weight. Right? I hope sometime Jim gets to the point where he does a Ninja Turtles type book for Defective Comics. If not Ninja Turtles, at least something from that black and white indie era that had, you know, the Crow and Usagi Yojimbo and the Tick. Like, I hope, Jim, that you might have something to say with your satirical look at comics and your cool energy and unique way of putting together a story. I think that would be really cool. Yeah, people do. They just tend to click on topics more. So I get that. Hearing Kirkman talk about the behind the scenes with the Ultimate X-Men was wild. I picked up every issue of Ultimate Universe at the time. Never had the idea that the futzing politics of it all. Yeah. Cerebus, sure. You want Jim to do Captain America? Ooh. Next year's book, The Pizza Ninja. Hey, I love it. I hope you could work in some of like the interesting aspects of like that 80s, late 80s into the early 90s era of black and white comics. It's really not even late 80s. It's throughout the whole 80s. Like something like just how personal some of the pages of The Crow felt, or how hilarious, how absolutely hilarious the Tick was. And you're like, well, this would never be done at Marvel or DC. This is great. The Pizza Ninja. Oh, dude, I'm so happy to hear that you've got some ideas already for something like that. Look at that. Not even interviewing him, and we get like a little bit of exclusive. That's what I call an exclusive. Exclusive. Oh, by the way, just since I was just thinking of Jim's, I showed that video to you guys, and I was talking up Punker Mike, and I was talking about like Jim's art and stuff. Watch that video over on his Kickstarter page, okay? Because he got what's the name of the band, Jim? He got a band like Talk Time, and the music is like this jazzy 70s perfect theme music. It's just incredible. Just incredible. You know what? Like, one of the happiest things for me is I grew up being a fan of The Tick because I loved it, but also Ben Edlund was kind of a local guy, not much older than me. And he kind of like represented like, anyone can, hit it big in their creative field if they want to, and they put in the work. It was really exciting. And I followed his career very closely, and he started working on other things that I loved, like, the show Angel and Venture Brothers and Supernatural. I loved all these things, and I was like, oh man, Ben Edlund continues to work on things that I love, independent of him being involved in them. I just love them. And then I made the Tick episode, and we've never like had a conversation, but he has replied a bunch to my social media posts and stuff, and reshared some of my stuff. And it means a lot to me. He's always said nice things to me, and it really like is one of my happiest things in comics, that I've been able to talk a little bit in a parasocial type of way to a writer and an artist that I really admire, and who has inspired me since I was like a very, very young teenager. And one time I supported a charity event where he was doing a sketch, a requested sketch, and I got a sketch, and since probably everybody asks him to do the Tick, I decided to ask him to draw Dean Winchester from Supernatural, and that's just something I love that I've got. I am going to New York Comic Con this year. I'll be there on Saturday and Sunday, as long as I can get my physical badges. They still have not shown up. If they're not in the mail today, I'm going to check the mail right after I finish the show. I'm in touch with the convention people, and they're going to have to set me up with will call. Oh, yeah. Yeah, the only cool thing about social media is that it does allow you to get in touch here and there with people that you admire, or at least get a question answered or something like that. And that is cool. That is cool. Some of the other shows I'm watching, like lately, I'm not watching a lot, but some of them sort of let me down. What did I finish that Alien Earth. Alien Earth was really, really good until it kind of wasn't. I like Alien Earth. It's still got potential in it, but I would say that episode 5 out of 8 episodes was easily its highlight. It was easily the best. And it never quite got close to how good that episode was after that. And then like the finale just sort of happened, and it's like, well, I hope we get a season 2. Otherwise, none of this makes sense. Yeah, it just kind of ended a little abruptly. Thank you for the super chat, and I love it. Spoon! It was a little disappointing. It wasn't a total disaster, but it was disappointing. Because like episode 5 was so good. So it was a little like, all right. What else? Strange New Worlds. I really like that show, but I will admit season 3 of Strange New Worlds wasn't as good as season 2. There needs to be a season 2 right now for it to even try to redeem itself. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a big cliffhanger. Yeah. Noah Hawley's been involved in comic book stuff for a while. I mean, he did do the show Legion. I knew that he worked on a Doctor Doom script, and I never wanted a Doctor Doom solo movie, so I'm fine that that didn't happen. That's the other show I was thinking of. Excuse me. Marvel Zombies came out. Overall, I liked it quite a bit. I think the animation style is pretty good. It suits it all right. What else can I say about Marvel Zombies? I'll talk about some of the things I liked. I liked that they chose Kamala Khan to be the main character. She actually worked quite well because she's just such a, pure superhero type of character. She wants to be heroic. She makes the tough choices, even if she's like a little scared or nervous, doesn't think she can do it. I like her as a character. I like Kamala Khan a lot. And having her be the central character in the same way that Frodo is the main character of Lord of the Rings. There's a big cast and a lot of stuff happening around, but there's one character that's been entrusted with carrying the plot device for everything. And I liked that decision. I liked that they rolled in all sorts of characters from the MCU that we don't usually get to highlight in other ways. They found an interesting way to use Red Guardian and Blade. Blade was fantastic. Riri and Ironheart and Hawkeye, Kate Bishop were used really, really well in this. Shang-Chi, Jimmy Woo, Death Dealer. Like they used all these. Zemo. They used Zemo really well. They used a lot of Rintra in the Doctor Strange comics was this, sort of Minotaur guy who trained under Doctor Strange. And we saw him in the background of Doctor Strange 2, the movie. But in this, he's got an actual role. And I liked what they did with a lot of those characters. Blade was super, super cool. No, but not all of the actors voiced their characters. It's like 60 to 70% are the actual actors, and some of them are just voice actors that sound similar. You don't really notice it in MCU. Blade, the movie, still hasn't happened. So far, he was just in Eternals. Just Eternals. Except this was also basically Blade. So, I liked it, though. This was a cool take on Blade. Blade was awesome. Well, technically, we also got one of the universal variants of Blade, didn't we? Because he was, Wesley Snipes in the Deadpool movie. So, yeah. Anyway, that was cool. That was cool. I would say, I don't know for sure, but I thought it looked like the Mahershala Ali character. I didn't say that right at all. I thought it looked like Mahershala Ali, but your mileage may vary. My wife got me this really cool pen that I'm using right now. It's a super delicate brush tip, and it feels a lot closer to actually using a real brush than brush markers, which typically have a pretty firm felt tip, and that makes it easy to work with quickly. This one you have to be a lot more careful and deliberate and slow down, but that becomes fun in its own way, a little challenge for drawing straight and delicate, not like just sort of slopping down a chunk of ink. And you can get some really precise lines, which are really fun. Let's see what people are talking about. Sorry. It is Arachnid Enforcer. This reminds me, I need to put my Mahfood patch on something. Not your forehead. Don't hurt yourself. It's crazy how Milton in issue 1 of Escape hit everything but the target. Rick Remender main characters are always racking up body counts. Interesting take, yeah. I think Milton's a fascinating character. He's full of contradictions. And if you can create a believable character full of contradictions, that's an interesting character. But they have to be believable contradictions. Because otherwise it doesn't seem like anything's consistent, and then it becomes not believable. I like Rick. I think when Rick writes superheroes, which isn't a whole lot these days, and that's fine, he's got his own ideas, but I think when he writes superheroes, he puts a lot of thought into how they could use their powers in unique ways and use them together or against each other. And I like that thought that he puts into that, because I think a lot of people just can devolve into really basic punching and kicking stuff, and it's losing what's fun and different about a superhero. How crazy over the top they can be, and weird, cool. Remember Adam Asidus in 7 to Eternity killed a whole city to save the God of Whispers? I actually didn't finish reading that one. I guess that's an oversight on my part. It's impressive to write a character who is far from perfect and still have them be likable and relatable. It's not easy. You know, an interesting little tidbit of information. Actually, you know what? Let me give you a couple interesting bits about here. I'm going to note that I'm moving around so that I could put a time code in here. I always put time codes in the episodes after, but I want to note this. I'm going to give you a little bit of extra info on the Michael Golden episode, because I got some follow-up great stories about it that I'll share here. So first of all, one interesting thing I found when I was looking at original Michael Golden art is that, you know, he inks a lot of his stuff himself. Not always, but he inked a lot of his own stuff. And I guess he did it with... not like India ink and stuff, you know. He used kind of cheap stuff, like I am right now, and so all of it now, instead of looking black, it's not archival quality. It's become what would you call it? Like sepia toned. It's all sort of brown. It's all sort of a light brown. So when he inked his own stuff, he I don't know exactly what he used, but it's interesting. Look at the original art that he inked, and it's all very faded. So I posted it and I got 2 interesting stories. One came from comic book pro Farrell Dalrymple. Great writer, artist. I've seen him speak. Really, really smart guy that understands not just storytelling, but the history of comics. And if you've ever seen... I've got an episode where I basically did this for an online Comic-Con panel talking about the history of the the teen team trope. That very much was inspired by some information I heard from Farrell Dalrymple once. He spoke about some of the history of that, and I remembered a little bit of it and remembered liking that history. So I looked it up and sort of did my own take on it. Anyway, Farrell Dalrymple replied to the Michael Golden episode, and he said that he was interning at Marvel Comics when Michael Golden was an art director. And it was when the New Mutants issue came out that Rob Liefeld drew with Cable on the cover holding a big, heavy machine gun, which was definitely traced from a Michael Golden drawing of Roadblock from G.I. Joe. Just is. And someone, and he said he was there as someone showed that to Michael, and Michael just sort of rolled his eyes, didn't say anything, was just sort of like, okay. But he's aware of it. He was the art director, so yeah, he was definitely aware of it. Anyway, another interesting story is I ended the episode saying one thing I came across that was a mystery was I have no idea what happened to the announced Superman annual that Michael Golden was illustrating, and we've definitely seen pages of it. The pages of it exist out there. Don't know if they were all drawn or not, but there are a bunch of pages you can find. But what happened to it? Well, one person said they were talking to the writer of it, Chris Claremont, at a convention. Now, by the time I'm telling you, this is third hand, but they said that Chris Claremont said he wrote that, and then Marvel said, no, that violates your contract with us. This was 1990. And so they had it pulled, and that's why it's never been published. But that would indicate that it's still out there and finished, which means DC at some point could theoretically publish it if all the pages were finished, because there's no such exclusive contract now. At the time, Claremont, I guess, had an exclusive deal because of the X-Men stuff, and I don't know why he would have thought that he could do a Superman story, but that's what this person said Chris Claremont told them. So just two interesting little tidbits, follow up after I posted the episode. He's really special. Yeah. Pop Gun War. That thing's incredible. I can't wait to see this upcoming book that he's doing with Rick Remender. It looks really interesting. But also, by the way, Farrell Dalrymple, really interesting history. Winner of one of the Xeric grants, which was started by Peter Laird of TMNT fame, if I'm remembering right, but I'm pretty sure I am. But Peter Laird started something called the Xeric grant, where he would donate funds to a worthy artist each year to publish their comic. And if I'm remembering right, Farrell Dalrymple was a very early winner of one of those grants, which helped get him in the industry. Is there a comic industry story you haven't covered because it's too complicated or there was too much to cover? Since I've been doing the show, you mean? Because, I mean, there's plenty of stories from before. But, yeah, like doing this weekly show? No, I've made some tough decisions here and there to talk about things that in some ways I feel like I would rather not, but it would be also kind of weird if I did a weekly show where I'm at least explaining what I think are the biggest pieces of comic book news, and I ignore something that clearly is big. I wouldn't say it brought me any pleasure this week, actually, to talk about my post about the Peacemaker emote and like all the hate that got me. That wasn't fun, actually. But I was like, but it would be weird if I didn't acknowledge it, because it was in the news. Like, there are legit news articles about it, and they link back to my post. So, you know, I was like, yeah, I guess I kind of got to talk about it. So if I'm going to talk about it, I'm just going to lean into it and talk about it as openly and honestly as I can. I'll even put it in the thumbnail, because if I'm going to talk about it, I think that's fair. Are there things that I've avoided? I think that sometimes when people pass away, it's so like, and they're not like a humongous name that I'm like, well, on one hand, I'd love to talk about them and like have people remember their legacy, and in another way, it just seems really sad, and it makes me sad. So like, I don't like talking about that stuff, but I mostly do, as long as I know. Sometimes there are things that there are plenty of news stories that, just to be clear, I've missed because I'm not doing this as a job where I'm sitting around like gathering news every day and getting paid for it. I'm not, do you know what I mean there? So there's news stories that I miss. What else? Is there anything I've intention? I would say that I don't go looking for some bits of news. Like, I don't look up the term Comicsgate just to see what somebody there has like posted on like one of their news sites. You know what I mean? Because there are like sites that lean politically one way or the other, and I just don't look for it. But if it was a big enough piece of news, I'd cover it. If it was like, hitting mainstream sources, I'm going to talk about it. Yeah, technically pot is legal. There's lots of pot stores around here. Maybe you could do a trope episode and take a hit of weed every time you come across a certain trope. Well, there's two reasons I wouldn't do that, just to be upfront. First of all, if you do that on camera, you're going to get demonetized and possibly even like shadow banned. Okay. You just are. You could probably do that on Twitch, but not on YouTube. And the second is I really don't partake. So it's just not my thing. Have I? Yes. Would I in a certain social situation? Possibly. But it's just not something I engage in much. I don't know. It's never done much for me. Which sometimes I go like, well, everybody seems to like it. Why don't I like it enough? I don't know. It's a funny idea. And if I was just starting out my channel, like if I went back in time, it legit is something that I might have done because I wouldn't have known any better and it would have amused me. But I probably wouldn't do it now. It's a funny idea. I wouldn't say it had a big effect. Although one time I was in a lot of pain. This is like over a year ago. Maybe like 2 years ago. I was in a lot of pain from something. Might have been like one of the times I had my frozen shoulder issues. And I took like I took a gummy that was really powerful, like way more powerful than I expected it to be. So I didn't really look that carefully at what kind of level of THC was in it. And I didn't feel anything for quite a while. And then it hit me. And Chrissy had taken one for her pain at the same time, my wife. And we were just like laughing and talking. And we kept forgetting what we were talking about and must have like embarrassingly idiotic, like a pair of people that night, I think. I would have loved to have gotten some video of whatever we sounded like and talked about that night, because I don't really remember. Thanks for asking. I would say that my shoulder is a lot better than it's been. I got a shot of cortisone, like a steroid, into it. And so ever since I got that shot, I would say that there's been very, very little pain, hardly any. Nothing that bothers me at all. I don't have full flexibility. This is me trying to reach above my head. Like this, see, I can just do that. This one, it just still won't. It won't move into certain positions 100%. So I need to do some more physical therapy. It's annoying. Thanks for asking, though. Yeah, maybe drinking beer on YouTube also gets you in trouble. I don't know. Back when I was doing it, I wasn't thinking about it. I sort of phased that out a while ago just because I was like, been there, done that. You know who used to use this specific pen that I'm using, this brush? Hero of mine, Kim Jung-gi. And I'm lucky enough to say that I met him in person a handful of times and actually owned some sketches by him that he did for me. Really remarks, I should say, more than a sketch, but still. And this was the specific pen that he would work with, but he was so delicate with it. It was incredible. And he's fast. He was really fast. Just so confident. Really miss having him in this world. Always admired his art, but also just how fast his approach was and how he just, he was just a creative force. Really, really impressive. What's the name of the pen? Oh, that's a good question. This is, Chrissy got it for me, so I didn't really look at the name. It's by Pentel. It's a Pentel Ultra Fine. And beyond that, I guess I don't know what specifically it's called, but it's got a really long brush to it. Really long, so it's very delicate. I think a lot of the reason I'm going slow is because I'm also, my mind is also thinking, be a host, tell a story, answer questions, just be talking, be engaging. Otherwise, I'd probably be working a little bit faster to give myself a tiny bit of credit. But, yeah. The name of the pen is Tim. I think it's good to push yourself out of your comfort zone. And I'm rarely that happy with what I do, but every once in a while I'm like, okay, there's a bit of a technique there that I could use next time and do a better job. I think it's important as an artist to push yourself out of your comfort zone as often as possible, or you'll never grow. And I think that that's my biggest challenge to myself, is that I don't push myself hard enough. I rely on things that I know, as compared to going I'm settling, essentially. I'm settling. And I could probably get better if I would just push myself harder and make the mistake, but learn from it. And it's I too caught up in trying to get it as good as possible the first time. Whereas I don't feel that same pressure when I write. I'm totally happy to, do another draft of a script and not get it perfect. I don't know. I don't know why when I'm drawing, I try to get it so right each time. And I'm afraid of making the mistakes, because that's part of what doing art is making the mistakes. I don't know. I don't know how you build confidence in your own art. I know how to learn. I know objectively how to get better at certain things, but I wouldn't say that I know how to be confident about these things. Knowing it objectively is different than actually fulfilling it. Maybe I'm just rambling on. Wow, 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 wow. I hope New York Comic Con is fun. I'm looking forward to it anyway. Get to see some friends, get to hang out with friends there, and yeah, it'll be a good time. It's always been a convention that I've had a pretty good time at. And I will say this, comic conventions are getting, I think, a little back to what they used to be before the pandemic. The pandemic really, really hit conventions hard with a lot of the major publishers not showing up, and they tend to bring exclusives and big artists and writers and other creative types, and you get like the big announcements when they're there. This year, DC has a huge booth. Marvel has a presence. A bunch of other publishers. I think Image has a booth again. And it's been a while. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to that. You froze with writing. I can understand where it comes from. Have I read any of James Robinson's Dark Horse comics? I'm reading one called Welcome to the Maynard about a magical hotel. No, I don't think I have since you said that. Maybe I should, but I guess I haven't. Hey, Jim, if you're there, have you finished drawing all the pages to Arachnid Enforcer at this point? You said you're coloring some, so I bet if you haven't, you're almost there. But yeah, I'm just curious, have you finished all the pages? I know you finished a lot of pages. Never heard of Silent Rage. I'll look it up. That sounds cool. I can write a novel inside a 3-month span, but I couldn't draw anything more complicated than stick figures if you had a gun to my head. Well, we're going to test that one. I'm on my way. Have you read the articles explaining Steve Ditko wanted Spidey to be orange and purple? No. Orange and purple? I've never heard that. I am going to read up on that. That is news to me. Huh. Fun. Slasher movie set in a movie theater called Popcorn. The killer in that movie is from an episode of Golden Girls where they get stranded on a beach while on vacation. What? I have no idea what just happened. Was the happening the one with like where the trees of the world got mad at people, so they released spores that drove people crazy? Was that the happening? That was a terrible movie. That had a scene where people literally ran away from wind. And it's even more boring than it sounds. Ran away from wind. Something you can't see and that can easily go faster than you could ever hope to run. You're gonna outrun wind. Okay. I was like in that Jurassic World movie where Chris Pratt's character outruns pyroclastic flow from a volcano. And he's literally encased in a cloud of the pyroclastic flow and jumps out of it down a mountain into the ocean below. And I'm like, first of all, bullshit that you could outrun, how fast that billows out from a volcano. Second, if it engulfed you, that smoky cloud, the pyroclastic flow, for even a second, you'd be dead. You're not going to jump out of that heroically. Maybe a car could, but whatever. And then Mark Wahlberg went on to be a scientist, at least he's been a scientist, I'll say, at least 3 times, none of them convincing. A science teacher in The Happening. Oh, we got to get away from these trees. I'll get to your comment in a sec, Chrissy, because that's a good one. What else? He was a scientist in Planet of the Apes. He was an astronaut. Oh, dude, I'm really glad I know how to outrun these apes. And then he was a scientist in the Transformers movies. Guys, I think I found a Transformer. In here. Oh my God. Terrible. Not convincing at all. He's good within a certain range. He's not a scientist. Yes, Chrissy's right. One time we were in New York for a New York Comic-Con, I think. And we went to a movie with our friends. Actually, the friends that we're going to see, one of them's getting married this week before Comic-Con. And then we'll be at Comic-Con with him. But anyway, yeah, we were like looking to kill some time. And so we saw this movie called The Ruins, where, you know, some teenage or 20-something type people go to, you know, Belize or Mexico, somewhere like that. They go off the beaten path, and there are evil flowers that can mimic human vocal patterns, and they trick you into coming into their clutches. Oh, come on over here. They sound like Adam Sandler, I guess. Oh, over here, I'm a really pretty flower. Why don't you come and pat me? I'm just a nice little flower. And then the flower kills you. The Ruins. It was so dumb. The Mutilator. It has a theme song that is really upbeat. Don't know that one. Yeah, The Ruins. I don't even remember much more about it other than that it had talking flowers. Yes, Jenna Malone was like the lead of that one. She hasn't done a whole lot lately, has she? She's good though. I like Jenna Malone. I just haven't seen her in anything in a while. Well, I think I'm going to call it a show, folks, because I just realized I've really got a lot that I still got to do to get ready for my trip, and I haven't eaten yet either, and I work tomorrow. So, yeah, I got to call it a night. I probably should have a little while ago, but I was having a good time. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I had a really fun show tonight. Thanks to all of you, and I'll see you real soon. Yes, Chrissy, I believe the flowers were murderous. So I did about maybe half of an Arachnid enforcer there, and that was definitely fun. I think Jim's got a great character. Hope you check that out again. Link is in the description below. When you see me next, I will be doing the show from Massachusetts. Oh, Gene, you know, how much more could I represent how excited I am that my favorite musical artist, Taylor Swift, has new music this Friday. Because that's definitely something that I knew. I definitely knew that Taylor Swift has new music coming out this week. There's no question that I knew that. See you in a week. See everybody in a week. Probably won't have anything for the Comic Tropes channel this week, but I will have a Patreon exclusive. It's actually about Marvel Zombies. They asked me to talk about Marvel Zombies. So if you're a subscriber on Patreon, you can see that later this month. What else? I'm working on a Spider-Man episode for Comic Tropes. Once Jim and I finish New York Comic-Con, we're going to talk about what we could do for Trash Movie Bonanza, and I'm sure that there's some good horror that we can both enjoy. I got 1 million new followers. Ooh. I've got a wonderful plate of nachos that I ate maybe like 2 of during the show that Chrissy made for me. So I'm going to reheat them and enjoy. And if you want to hear a little bit more, I'll just plug this. If you want to hear a little bit more discussion about the Peacemaker emote and that news from a more objective source, I do know that the channel Bronze Age Nerd is about to go live in like about 4 minutes, and they're talking about it as part of just their weekly comic news topics. So that's about to happen in a few minutes if you wanted to hear from a more objective side. I'm going to see what they have to say. And I'll try not to interrupt the show too much. Thanks, everybody. Tell you what, double salute. Thanks for being here. I had a great time. Take care of each other.